You suckers.
I do.
What are you laughing at?
Then again, maybe not.
Oh,
I apologize.
it's worth a shot.
Well, I used to have them because of David.
Somebody, I've got some. You do? Oh, if you, I was looking for one or two. I think I'm going to need one. Look at that. Thank you. I caught once without, and I was. The hour being 7 o'clock on Monday, August 23rd, 2021. I'd like to call to order the Laconia City Council meeting. Obviously, we are in person this evening, which is great, not to be taken for granted. We also have a Zoom link with a webinar ID 885-3677-1091 with a password of 301025. To listen in only, you may call 1-646-558-8656. That will give you an opportunity to listen in, and but you will not be able to participate in the meeting. To view the meeting on YouTube under the City of Laconia website, you would go to www.youtube.com/Laconia NH. Before we go any farther, I'd ask us all to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I'd ask Councilor Cheney if he would lead us.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Councilor Cheney. We're joined at the council table this evening by recording secretary, our city clerk, Cheryl Hebert. And I'd ask city clerk to please call the roll.
Counselor Cheney,
Here.
Counselor Susie,
Here.
Counselor Littman,
Here.
Counselor Haynes,
Here.
Counselor Hamel is not present, Counselor Felch,
Here.
Mayor Hosmer.
All hears, right? Here. Also in attendance, City Manager Scott Myers has joined us, as well as Glenn Smith, our Finance Director. Welcome. It's nice to have you. Moving along to item number 7 on our agenda, which is acceptance of minutes from previous meetings. Regular meeting minutes of August 9th, 2021 were distributed to the City Council on Thursday, August 12th, 2021. With no corrections or changes submitted to the clerk, the minutes will be accepted as distributed. I guess we have no consent and action items under item number 9 on your agenda. This is the citizen comments for matters not on the agenda. I'd ask anyone in the audience this evening, if there's a matter you'd like to speak to that is not on tonight's agenda, now would be the appropriate time. Those of you joining us online, well, actually, in the Zoom, I would raise your hand on Zoom, and Mr. Smith, if you see someone, let me know and allow them an opportunity to speak. Everybody holding back for an item on the agenda? Come right up. And I'm glad that you did. If you could let us know your name and where you live.
Mr. Anderson, Guilford Ave,
Okay.
Laconia, District 2, Ward 2. I've got a little issue with the civil infraction for the dog license. I elect to do the right thing and get a dog license for my dog, $2. I get out, I'm getting old. I can't remember things the way I used to. I didn't know that it was the 29th was the cutoff date for a $2 ticket, a $2 tag. So I went down there. That's what she wants to charge me, a civil infraction, $25. That's a quarter of the year of my dog's food. and my dog is my only companion, so I really need that dog. I can't afford it. I mean, I'm on Social Security and I don't understand why you don't send a bill out. Belmont sends a notice, Gilbert sends a notice. You'll send a bill when it has a civil infraction on it. So, I mean, a friendly reminder would be nice for at least for the older people that don't remember.
Are you a senior citizen?
Am I? Oh, yeah.
So, Mr. Myers, is there a
I'm
way to
almost
waive this
69.
civil penalty for senior citizens?
I would need to look into that, Mr. Mayor. I don't have the answer off the top of my head. But I do know that we do have an alert system for folks through the city website that people can create an account and get electronic notifications for just about anything that the city does. It realistically to send out a paper notice on a $2 fee, to do a stamp and an envelope and staff time probably realistically does not make sense. I'm going to look at the clerk, but I believe the civil forfeiture is in state law.
It
Okay,
is.
so the $25 fee is not something that we set here. It is set in state law. And the deadline typically is when for registering dogs?
April 30th, and I send out email notifications beginning in January, if we have your email on file.
So April 30th is the original deadline, and then we don't issue the civil forfeiture until the end of June,
July.
So there's even a couple of month grace period
I-
after the April 30th.
Mr. Mayor.
Seems like seems like an excessive fine if it's $2 to register your dog. I mean, I'm not looking at you and blaming anybody. I'm just thinking that seems to be a little heavy handed on the state's part.
I think there's a lesser fee for senior citizens, and their fee might be anywhere from $7 to $10 or $9 for folks who are not senior citizens, and then spayed or neutered and not spayed or neutered. So there are different price points, I believe.
So $2 for a senior citizen, $6.50 for a fixed dog, and $9 for a not fixed dog.
Mr. Mayor, I have a question.
Yes.
Yeah, here's my question with this thing. Mr. Anderson, thank you very much for coming forward, okay? But my question is this: do you have a computer?
I have a tablet.
But you don't get
No.
emails regularly, do you?
I get text messages on my phone, but
Hey,
that's
so-
about it.
Okay, so if we're sending out electronic messages, and this is a problem I've always had, especially with the elderly who don't have computers and stuff like that. How do they get notified? I get a real headache with that one. I'm glad you brought it up to a point so I could bring up another point, but that's where I'm coming
It's just getting harder. I mean, you guys all know, you're trying to run a city. It's getting harder for you. It's extremely hard for all of us to make ends meet. And I mean, I'm sure you hear the news. And something I was wondering, for a $2 thing that covers me for a year, why is there a cutoff date within, if I come down and I'm paying for a year for $2, if I come down at any point during the year as a willing participant in your program, why can't I just pay the fee then? I don't understand. I mean, why do we have to have that cutoff date? And why do we not have to have some kind of a notification to the older people that don't do the computers?
So what ward are you in, Mr. Anderson?
Too.
In your ward number 2. Sounds like something you should be looking into, Counselor
Take
Cheney,
care of
Counselor Susie. Good. I'm glad. Sounds like you've got an advocate right here sitting with you, and I'm
Good.
glad you brought it to our attention.
How do I handle this? I mean, I'd like to really take care of my debt.
Absolutely. Counselor Susie, perhaps you
Oh,
can find a
if
way
you
to
could-
follow up.
Yep, if you can see me or give me your phone number and I'll come and talk to you.
You want it right now?
I got a better idea.
Yeah, go ahead, Mr.
Why don't you stop by the clerk's office tomorrow and see what your status is?
Okay, 603-455. 0208.
Fair enough.
Excuse me for interrupting.
No,
That's okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So stop and see the clerk tomorrow.
Go see him tomorrow?
Yeah, and she'll tell you what your status
I
is.
tried to do that. I said, can't you just take the 2 now? And she
Yeah.
goes, no. Not her,
Okay.
someone else.
Okay.
Okay, understood.
Thanks again.
All
Thanks
right.
for joining us
See you
tonight.
tomorrow.
Have a nice night.
You too. Any other comments from citizens for items not on tonight's agenda? Okay. Terrific. Moving along to item number 11 on our agenda, nominations, appointments, and elections. Michael Foote, who interviewed with us, At the August 9th meeting, seeking reappointment to a regular member position on the Zoning Board of Adjustment for a 3-year term. Right now, I'd be looking for a motion to move to reappoint Michael Foot to a regular member position on the ZBA for a 3-year term expiring at the end of August 2024. So made by Counselor Felch, seconded by Counselor Haynes. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please raise your hands. That's 5 votes in the affirmative. That motion passes. In the same vein, I believe, we have Michael Foot seeking reappointment to a regular member position on the Conservation Commission for a 3-year term expiring at the end of August 2024. I'll be looking for a motion right now to reappoint Mr. Foot to said position. So made by Counselor Cheney, seconded by Counselor Susie. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor indicate by raising your hand. That's 5 votes in the affirmative. That motion passes. Thank you very much, Mr. Foot, for volunteering and serving. Moving right along now to item number 13 on our agenda, which is under public hearings. This is a public hearing for resolution 2021-16 relative to authorizing the application for a $400,000 loan for the New Hampshire Clean Water State Revolving Loan Fund for the Elm Street Sewer Project and appropriating funds for the same. Notice of this public hearing was made available in the August 11th, 2021 edition of the Laconia Daily Sun, posted at City Hall, Laconia Public Library, Community Center, and the SAU. The fiscal impact of this, the approval, if it's approved, will authorize borrowing $400,000 from the CWSRF at interest rates ranging from 2.0 to 2.37%, depending on the term as determined by the Council Finance Committee. Action on this item may be taken up under unfinished business this evening. So I'd like to open the public hearing at 7:11 PM. Anyone online or in the audience who would like to address this, now would be the appropriate time. Okay. Apparently, no one would like to address this issue either online or in person, so I'd like to close the public hearing at 7:12 PM. Under item 13B, which is a public hearing on an application for tax relief under RSA 79-E for the property at 50 Church Street, also known as the former Holy Trinity School. Notice of this public hearing was made available in the August 11th, 2021 edition of the Laconia Daily Sun, posted at City Hall, Laconia Public Library, Community Center, and the SAU. The City Council has the authority to grant tax relief under RSA 79E, and the financial impact of that tax relief will vary by the nature of the project and the time period and dollar amount of tax relief granted. Once again, action on this item may be taken up under unfinished business. I'd like to open the public hearing in this matter at 7:13 PM. Anyone either online or in the audience that would like to speak to this matter, now would be the appropriate time. Thank you, Mr. Smith. I'm sorry, I just can't, I've got to wait a minute. It can't be 7:13 opening, 7:13 closing. I'm going to wait this one out. I'd like to close the public hearing at 7:14 PM on item 13B on our agenda. Moving right along to item 13C, which is the public hearing on application for tax relief under RSA 79E for the property at 781 Union Avenue. Notice of this public hearing was also made available in the August 11th edition of the Laconia Daily Sun, posted at City Hall, Laconia Public Library, Community Center, and the SAU. Once again, the City Council has the authority to grant tax relief under RSA 79E, and the financial impact of the tax relief will vary by the nature of the project and the time period and dollar amount of tax relief granted. Action on this item, again, may be taken up under unfinished business this evening. I'd like to open the public hearing at 7:14 PM. And anyone in the audience tonight who'd like to address this matter or online, raise your hand online or step forward. Please come forward, sir. If you could introduce yourself.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Scott. My name is Ron DeCola. I'm representing Pogus 42 LLC. We are the owners / developers of the project that's in question tonight, the Opera House, as we refer to it. The project is and always has been a three-phase project. First floor being where the newspaper is and the coffee shop. The second floor being the Opera House, and the third floor, which is unfinished, being probably will be condominium somewhere down the road. So the project is still in the works, so to speak. We made initial contact with the certificate of occupancy for the Opera House was issued on June 9th of this year. And about a week after that, I made contact with the city manager's office, Nancy Brown first, and then Scott. And Scott got back to me. There was a problem with Nancy Brown's email. And the application, I also met with Scott subsequent to that. Our application was filed on the 19th of July. And then on the 22nd of July, Scott issued an opinion letter to us, basically saying that our application is going to be rejected because of interpretation of some verbiage in one particular word, intends, as it's written on your PDF application here in town. So our application clearly states that, again, that the project is ongoing and we are not finished with this project. So we intend, if you will, on completing this project somewhere down the road. RSA 79E was always an incentive for us to come into Lakeport. We've put millions of our own dollars into Lakeport, and we intend on putting a lot more in after that too. And I think you're all going to be very happy once this all gets redeveloped. So it's a partnership we seek wherever we go and develop. It's a partnership we seek with the communities, and RSA 79E is a part of that partnership. And it's an incentive for developers like us. And we count heavily on that because this money's at risk. We're not, none of these, well, hardly any of them are pre-leased. And so we're doing everything at risk. And we just ask for, we ask for reconsideration by the city council on this application, because again, it is very important to us. The RSA is, you know, we've reviewed it. We've had our attorneys review it. I mean, it's kind of, it's not really clear. Nobody really says it's a deadline with application. Yeah, there's a futuristic terms and all that stuff. But in the city's policy and procedures make no mention of any application deadlines. Everything is hanging on that one word, intends, which seems to denote that the project again is in the works and not necessarily completed, which ours is. So I would respectfully ask the city council to review this and accept our plea and our filing for this. We'd like to move forward with this and the other projects that we have going.
Thank you very much, Mr. DeCola. Just one question.
Sure.
You received a certificate of occupancy on June 9th?
For the Opera House, yes.
Okay. And the application for the project for 79E consideration came in on?
It came on July 19th. But again, I met with Scott about a week after we received the pandemic hit us pretty bad, like everybody. I mean, it set us back budget-wise and in terms of procedures and hiring and getting staffing and all that stuff. So that really set us back a lot, but we're back on track.
Thanks very much. Any other questions or comments at this point? Council seeing none. Thank you again.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, City Council.
Still on item number 13C on our agenda. If anyone in the audience has any comments on this during the public input session, anyone online, Mr. Smith? Thank you. Seeing no other requests for comment, we'll close the public hearing on this matter at 7:19 PM. Item number 13D, which is the public hearing on Plantation and Colonial Roads. Notice of this public hearing was made available in the August 12th, 2021 edition of the Laconia Daily Sun, posted at Laconia City Hall, Laconia Public Library, Community Center, and the SAU. Public Works has recommended that the City Council consider declaring Plantation and Colonial an emergency lane with a fixed ending date of June 1st, 2024. This will establish a date by which they must have either created a homeowners association to maintain their roads or organized and obtained support to have their roads accepted under the betterment process. The fiscal impact of this entails is such that since Public Works is presently plowing and grading Plantation and Colonial to the city's emergency lane standards, there would be no additional expenditures. Again, action on this item may be taken up under unfinished business. This report was submitted by Wes Anderson, the Director of Public Works. I'd like to open the public hearing at 7:20 PM. And if there's anyone in the audience that would like to speak to this matter or anyone online, now would be the appropriate time. Welcome. It's nice to have you. If you introduce yourself, and
Thank you. My name is Erica Golter.
that might even come up a little bit, so you might not have to lean too much.
Perfect.
How's that?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I live on Plantation Road. I just purchased a property there a couple of years ago. On the discovery sheet that was presented to me, it said that the roads were frequently maintained by the town. And so I guess I thought that's what it was. I soon came to find out that there has kind of been a back and forth question of what's going to be, who's going to be taking responsibility for Plantation Road. Through some communications I've had with my neighbors, I learned that Plantation Road has been maintained by the city for 50 years. I guess I'm a little bit confused why now would be the time to question whether or not the city would continue to do what they've always done, if that wouldn't be something that could be grandfathered in. I guess that would be my first question. And my second question is, I've recognized that the City of Public Works is presenting an idea that we would have an emergency lane set up as an option, and then there would be some kind of an end date with a stipulation that maybe some things would be collaborated by then by an association. My question would be, if that doesn't happen, then what happens in 2014 if there's an emergency?
2024.
I'm sorry, 2024 if there's an emergency. That would be another question of mine, I suppose. I am really concerned about this. I know I haven't met any of you at all. I did sit in a meeting with Wes. I don't know if this is appropriate. I don't know if this is an appropriate forum, but I had a conversation with Wes saying that he told me directly that there had been some falsified documents about Plantation Road. And then he kind of backpedaled and said that they were inadvertently falsified. So I think that maybe there needs to be a little bit of an investigation of what's going on. I don't know exactly how to present that or who to present it to.
Sure.
I do know that I feel like I'm very frustrated myself because I spent $250,000 on a property that within 6 months came to find out that potentially I would be pushed into a situation where I would be having to pay a lot more. So, I guess I'm not really sure what to do about that, but I totally wanted to just sit here and tell you guys my position. I feel like I've been cheated for sure, but I do have questions, and, I don't know if you guys have considered any of that stuff.
Well, I'm sorry, I missed your last name again.
My last name is Golter.
Bolter. Okay.
Yes.
Well, thank you for coming in and speaking this evening. As a former counselor from Ward 6, which is the ward that you're in, it is something that we considered a couple of years ago, So this has been something that we've discussed and realized that there has been some degree of confusion. So certainly, I'm very empathetic that you're in a situation where you're faced with these choices and maybe don't have all the answers that you should have. And I think one of our jobs here in the city is to try and clarify this and make sense of it, not only for the residents who purchased, who are landowners or property owners there, but also try to balance the interests of city taxpayers as well, as we consider streets that we didn't anticipate owning ourselves and constantly maintaining. So I realize you're sort of left in the lurch a little bit there, and I'm sorry that you are. This is a tough situation. One question I had for you, maybe you can help. You talked about a discovery sheet that was provided to you prior to purchasing the property.
Yes,
Who provided you that?
would have been the realtor,
Who was the realtor?
Stephen Oates from the Bean Group. It came from the previous sellers, so they filled out the discovery, which said that these roads were frequently maintained by the town. So that's what I was made aware of.
And it sounds like you relied on that assertion as well.
Of course, yeah, certainly did.
Well, thank you very much for sharing this. I don't know if this is anything that you would choose to get into a little bit here and answering questions, Scott, or not. I don't want to put you on the spot. It's not like we've.
I'm definitely
Kept you
open to questions. Just to give a little bit of input on that taxation thing that you were speaking about. I pay $4,000 a year in taxes on a third of an acre.
Yeah.
And, I'm not exactly sure where all of that money is going to. Obviously, it's going to the schools, going to the town. But I'm also a taxpayer as well.
Sure. Yeah, and I didn't mean to imply that you weren't, obviously, yes. And anyway, go ahead, Scott.
I was going to say, I think there's a lot of people looking to speak to us, so I think it's probably better off that we just continue with letting people speak versus getting into a Q&A at this point. We can always continue it under unfinished business.
Okay, and I think that's what we'll do. So we may have you, if you've got the time to hang around for a little while, and we'll get to it a little later on in the meeting when we bring up it as a part of the deliberation. Is that okay?
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Come right up. Sure.
Yeah, hi, I'm Frank Marino from 52 Plantation Road. Thank you for taking a few minutes to
Mr.
listen
Moreno,
to
welcome.
some of our concerns. Thank you. I've been on Plantation Road for about 30 years. All the time I've been there, that road has been maintained. I figured it was part and parcel of what I pay my taxes for. And I have 8 grandchildren. They're up there all the time. There are people elderly that are up there often, all the time. I'm just very concerned when I hear that you will no longer maintain a road with tax-paying citizens with children and elderly and millennials too. Everyone's there. But you would just abandon that road unless we paid, I think the last time I heard 2 years ago, I don't know if you were at that meeting, like $12,000 a year additional in taxes to have paving, lights, not necessarily town sewer. Many of us have septic systems up there, but we could get the whole shebang for like $12,000 a year additionally in taxes, which was obscene 2 years ago. It's even more obscene now. But I guess what is our alternative if, other than forming an association to get the road maintained? Is there another alternative? Could we get pavement? And is there a better deal than $12,000 a year per owner? I'm just kind of curious. I was at that meeting 2 years ago and nothing was really answered then. And so far what I see is that we don't have any choice except to accept what the city council says and have our road abandoned. And it just doesn't seem right. I mean, I'm paying $5,000 a year in taxes. You're not even going to pick up my rubbish or my recycling. What is that? I just don't understand that. For 30 years I've been here, I've always felt this was a wonderful area, but it's making me start to wonder. It just is, it bothers me because I've been here so long. And my alternative is what? Sell my house that I've had for 30 years, and go somewhere else. I mean, I don't want to have to do that, but to just say because the Public Works doesn't want to do it anymore, it's not in their budget anymore. I mean, how much does it cost? Doesn't cost $12,000 a year per person, I can tell you that. I'm willing to, hire them, at a normal rate to maintain the road. I could probably get others to do the same thing. What would it cost for us to pay the Public Works Department extra, to do our road? But it's hard. And it's not just as simple as saying they don't want to do it anymore. Well, I'm sorry, they don't want to do it anymore, but it's going to hurt us. And I just needed you to know that, okay?
Thank you very much, Mr. Moreno. I appreciate you taking the time to speak with us tonight. You don't have to raise your hand, just step right up.
Bill Hutt, I'm here on behalf of Jack Marizio. Without getting into the merits on either side, I discern that based on the questions asked thus far, that many of the people in the audience do not understand the better assessment and the advantages of that in finding a solution. The formation of an association, I think, is problematic because you always have the few that don't want to participate in anything, and that gums things up. So the betterment assessment, depending on the length of the bond, and certainly I would assume the rates nowadays are pretty advantageous. You lump in all the costs of engineering, et cetera, and people are able to pay out during the bonding period. And I've worked with over the years a couple of times, and it's been an equitable solution because it's not hurting the taxpayer because it's going out over that 20-year term. It's been probably 25 years since I monkeyed around with this with clients, so I might be off on my term, but obviously with the rates today, it would be advantageous to push it out there as far as the bonding can go. And maybe that ought to be explained to the audience as a solution. You have a bad situation. Everyone's in the pot. Why not come up with something equitable, give them the opportunity? I think it sounds like an education process that maybe will come to a solution. And I'm reserving my clients' rights, but people can pay a lot of money in court and not get a solution. Whereas if you have something on the books statutorily, it seems to be the way to at least explore it, at least have knowledge about it. That's my spiel.
Thanks very much. Thank you. Come right up.
Daniel Valley. I live at 22 Plantation Road. We bought here about 8 years ago. We bought here because we lived in Pembroke, New Hampshire, which was way too expensive to retire to, we felt. And this was a beautiful area and very inexpensive, we thought, to retire. My wife is now retired, so we're somewhat on a fixed income at this point. And we were told by the owners of the home that we bought 8 years ago, just before this all started, that it was a town maintained road for forever, since it's been there. So it doesn't make sense after 50 years that we would be the ones responsible for the change that is now being placed on our shoulders. Nowhere on my deed does it say that it's a private road. We did check with the town when we did move in to see if it was a town maintained road, because it was dirt and we were wondering. We didn't want to take the homeowner's word for it, and we were told it was in fact a town maintained road. So this is now a burden on my family, because we are close to retirement. My wife is, as I said. So this is a big deal to us. I mean, we thought we had our permanent retirement home at this point, and we're in the same position now where we have thought about putting it up for sale. But the problem is I couldn't feel right by not telling whoever was buying that this is now a problem. So we've decided to hang on and see what goes on. It just doesn't make sense. And I have been told, which I didn't live there at the time, that this road was actually paved at one point also. So I'm wondering why this road is now dirt again. So we have a lot of questions also. Now, I don't know if anyone can speak of that. I know there is certain areas in the road where you can find some old pavement still. So I believe it was paved at one time, and I can't imagine why it was pulled up and turned back into dirt. And the town, what I'm told, is the people that did pave it. So why would that happen also? So I have a lot of questions on this also. And to me, it's just, it's crazy important to us at this point, because
Sure.
like I say, I am very close to retirement, and this could add years to my retirement age. I just wanted to speak my piece, and hopefully somebody can speak on why it was paved at one point, and at least that's my understanding, and why that pavement is no longer in place.
I'm not familiar with it being paved at one point. I can't speak to it, but certainly we can make note of it. And when the appropriate time during deliberations come, bring it up. How about that?
Okay, I just wanted that as my piece. And
Sure. Thanks very much for taking time to come and talk to us.
Hello, my name is Devereaux Davidson. I'm in Plantation. I
Hello.
bought it 2 years ago. I didn't know it was a dirt road when I bought it. I bought it in the winter time, and I did my research and didn't know it was paved. I mean, it wasn't maintained. Heard it was maintained forever. I seen the trucks go up and down. And after 50 years, I don't know why you're gonna stop now maintaining the road, and you want to bring the whole neighborhood to bring all the barrels down in front of my house. I'm at the bottom of the street. You're gonna have 200 barrels there every week. They be running up and down the street. That's kind of nuts. And on my tax card, it has the road be paved on here from you guys. So it must have been paved at some time. You never took it off, because my description of the street is paved. It doesn't say it's private or public, it just says a paved road, and it's gonna, I wouldn't have bought the house if I knew it was gonna be just as big of a mess. It's only been 2 years now we owned it, and we found out maybe 3 months later after we bought it, that it was a big mess. That you guys coming, and there's no public knowledge of this anywhere. I need your records, my deeds, tax records. You know, it's only see things on research. In 1971, you guys started maintaining the road, taking it, having trash pickup and plowing and breaking the streets. And you're stopping it now. It's kind of nuts.
Thanks very much for your comments. Anybody else? Let's take this. Step right up. Come on. You're,
Hi, Howard. Thank
I'm
you,
well.
Mr.
How are
Mayor
you?
and Council. My name is Sue Fraccaroli. I'm at 60 Colonial. And I'd like to just mention, I have pictures of my sons from a few years back. This was in 2001. The road was paved. There's pictures of my sons riding a scooter right here. You can't ride that on a dirt road. We bought the property in 2007, so closing in on 14 years. It's been a dirt road since we've been there. It has always been maintained. I don't know if you're familiar with the area. Plantation Road is it's a huge hill. It's a huge dirt road. If it's not maintained, it's impassable. After a good thunderstorm, you really can't get up that road. And I don't know how myself, my family, or anyone that lives up there would be able to have access to their house if that road isn't maintained or paved in some fashion. It disturbs me to think that in 2024, it's going to end. I don't know how we'll get up there. There are people that are retired. My husband and myself are planning on retiring there in a few years with any luck. And it really concerns me to think that we won't be able to get down the hill, or because we're at the very top of the hill. It's pretty treacherous. So I'd like to, know if there's what's going to happen, what our options are. It is very concerning. Getting an association together is very difficult. All the neighbors aren't cohesive. We don't know everyone. I could certainly get a list of names, but I don't know who would maintain that. I couldn't take it upon myself to go and collect money from everybody every month or whatever it would be to make sure the road got maintained. And again, seeing that the road were paved at some point, I don't know how thorough of a paving job this was, but it was definitely not the way it is now. Over the past couple of years too, the maintenance up there has been getting worse. It's really like walking across a beach now. It's sandy. You can't just walk. It's very loose sand. It's just not very safe up there. And again, like everyone else, we are taxpayers. We pay our taxes faithfully every year. And then to think also that we won't have postal service or garbage or recycling pickup or emergency services can't even get up there. My neighbor Erica, she didn't mention this, but she's a single mom. She's got a 5-year-old son up there, and she's right next door to the top of the hill there. So it's very concerning. I hope that they'll be taken into consideration. Our house was built in 1957, so it's been maintained all this time. All of the real estate records that we have from when we bought it state that it's a public road. It was never said that it was a private road and that we'd at some point be responsible for maintaining it. So I just wanted to have that heard, and I hope that we can come up with some solution that will benefit everybody. And that's all.
Thanks for taking the time to speak with us tonight. Would you mind leaving those photos behind?
No, who wants
Copies?
them?
You can give it right to
Thank
city
you.
clerk. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is
Welcome.
John Booth, 120 Plantation Road. I bought my house from Chief Baker, Bill Baker, and I was told that I don't have the clout that he has. But I have a picture that of it being paved when I bought in '02. And, obviously it's concerning. I echo everybody's concern here. I'm just wondering why when they repair it, the guys do a great job, but it's beach sand. Of course, it's gonna wash down the hill. This stuff lasted for years. And I just don't know why it can't be maintained like this. So just wanted to share my picture if you don't.
Thank you very much, Mr. Booth, for leaving that behind. And thanks for taking the time to speak with us. Anyone else in the audience tonight who'd like to speak before we go to the online comments?
Ontario from Plantation Road.
How do you do?
Good,
Welcome.
how are you? I don't know why all of a sudden, all these years, I understand Scott Meyer's financial, this has got to be financially the reason why this is going to change. If it's an emergency lane, does it have to go in front of a public hearing every time it's made it an emergency lane? Does anybody know that? Is there supposed to be a hearing?
I can't speak to that right now. I would defer to the city manager at this point.
Because it's been over 5 years, consecutive years. That, of course, it's been since 1970 that the road's been maintained. Great job maintaining the road. I just don't get why now. There's just financial, it's got to be financial. And I think it's wrong. But it's been over 5 consecutive years that the town has been maintaining it. When the police chief lived up there for Laconia, things changed a little bit, and I think that's when they started putting in the pavement and fix the road better. It's just too long. It's too long. So, and I ditto everybody behind me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Terrio, for joining us tonight. Any other comments from folks in the audience tonight? Come right up.
Hi, I'm Marilyn Hughes. I live at 53 Colonial Road. And I think the road looks terrific because when we go up Colonial, they're doing a nice job. At any rate, all I want to know is, do you have a figure that tells you how much it costs per year to maintain our road, to plow it and to do the sanding and maintain it? So we have some kind of idea if we decide that we have to do it ourselves, how much it would cost per household. And of course, there will be households that can't do it. And they're really in a bind because you can't sell your house either. It's a sad situation that could be resolved, I think, with the city working with us. But I just would like to know if you do have a figure to let us know how much it actually costs to take care of that road every year. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Hughes. Anyone else before we go online? Hello.
I'm Nicole Doherty. I live at 38 Plantation Road. At least my concern is the same as everyone else. Looking at my deed, it doesn't necessarily say either way. My mortgage insurance does say that they looked into it, that it was a it was a public road. And then in 2024, when we go to all of a sudden now we're not maintaining the road at all. Because this doesn't say that we have an option or a hearing at that point to change it from an emergency access. It just says you're on your own. What does that do to my taxes? Because right now I'm paying for maintenance of my road and trash and that. I'm like, I'm not willing to pay the same. You just leave us high and dry.
Fair enough. Thank you very much, Ms. Doherty. Anyone else? The back corner, can almost see around the corner there. Anybody there? No? Okay. Oh, here comes somebody. We waited long enough. Someone else would show up. That's great. Welcome.
Mark Dooley, 114 Plantation Road.
Hi, Mark.
Hi, how's it going?
Good.
So my father bought the property originally when we get back from Vietnam. It's been maintained amazingly ever since then. Since then, me and my wife have taken over. We have a 15 and 9-year-old right now. We have a new baby coming in December. And we're not gonna be able to get an ambulance up there, or what's going on? Like, it's concerning.
Sure.
The taxes are thousands more than my father's paying for a larger property and a larger house down in Winchester, Mass. It seems quite unfair that all of a sudden after 50, 60 years, it's just pulled away. But I'm not a great public speaker, sorry.
I think you're doing great. And I think your point's spot on. So thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay, no one in person. Mr. Smith, Mr. Diwali online? Thanks very much. Hi, John.
Hi, good evening. This is John DeWally of 26 Heritage Road. How you doing tonight?
Great. Glad you could join us.
Yes, me too. Thank you for the Zoom link. Thanks for everybody's time tonight to listen to our concerns. As you recall, we've spoken about this in the past in person at the City Hall. I think this was about 2 years ago now. And we were asked to speak before the town spoke. And here we are again speaking before I think we understand really what the implications are of what you're presenting to us. So in that light, in correspondence with our last meeting, we were supposed to have a separate meeting where the town would prepare a presentation. So that way the residents could truly understand what a fire lane is now that this is new, what a betterment assessment is for the town to accept the roads, and also what the city's expectations would be of an association if one were to be formed. But I think what's most important here is the fact that we're completely deleting the past 50 years of past practice, and we're only looking at now and what the financial implications are to the city now. Those implications go much further than just the city's wallet. As many people have spoken, they're looking to retire in this area. So they're going to be on a fixed income pretty soon. And the betterment assessment and changes to taxes are certainly going to affect their ability to do so. And now that we've begun having this discussion over the past couple of years, who are we in good faith to sell our homes saying that they're on a public road? So there's also financial implications there now where people feel stuck in their homes where they bought, assuming that they were on a public road. Why wouldn't they? The deed doesn't say otherwise, and town services are offered. The roads are plowed, trash pickup comes. It functions like any other road in the city, with the exception that it's dirt and not asphalt. So there's also mortgage implications that come along with this as well. I know that when we purchased up there, the mortgage provider was explicit in understanding the nature of the area, that it being a dirt road, and they were confused as to why there was no association being a dirt road. And we told them it was public. That's what we understood when we purchased the home. So there was no hesitation after that point. But now going forward, what are we supposed to tell our mortgage providers? And like someone else spoke, from an insurance perspective. So, what we're looking at here is the financial implications are many, and that's just a small part of the puzzle here. We also have emergency response aspect to this. As a few people have spoken who live further up the hill, the road has deteriorated in the past 2 years that I've been there. The quality of material that's used to resurface the road is subpar for what you're trying to accomplish. the team that comes up there and does it, when they grade it and get it all level, it is fantastic. They do a wonderful job. Please give them our best regards in that respect, because they do a good job. And this is not to take away from anybody's job in the city. So, with using these subpar materials, the road ruts out easier now. The drainage on the sides of the roads fill with sand, and it's going to be a snowballing problem. And understandably, it's going to cost more for the city to repair those problems. So we back up to when the roads were paved in the early 2000s, and we have to ask, why did this change? So there are a lot of questions here that we have that are going unanswered, and it's tough for us as a group of homeowners to prepare ourselves for what the city is trying to do. I think, this goes well beyond what minor savings might come to the city. As you know, my background is construction, and we've built a number of subdivisions, and what you're doing to repair that road is a variable cost year to year. It depends on how much it rains and how much it snows. But the proper materials could defer those costs and make that road maintenance a lot easier. The other problem that we run into is public utility maintenance, right? We have the Lakes Region Water Authority supplying us with water. We have Eversource supplying us with electricity. If the town is to leave us to our own devices without really understanding what those are, who is going to be responsible for ensuring that the utilities are properly maintained, that the water is properly maintained with the right depth of cover over the pipes so there's no freezing, so people can get to poles, repair utility lines, cut back brush, and all those things. So I think what you guys are looking at, and I understand where you are from a fiscal perspective of identifying your high cost centers and eliminating them. But what you're doing here is your implications onto the taxpayers who pay the same tax rate as everyone else in the city. What you're doing to them, the implications go far beyond. So I think there needs to be a couple step process here in front of us. I think one is that we need to have that town meeting where we can understand what the scenario is, what your expectations are, and you can hear what our expectations are after understanding what yours are. I think that's just transparency and clear communication. The other thing I think that we need to get through everybody's mind in the town is stop telling the residents on the road that it's a private road, because we haven't made that decision yet. And as far as I know, that decision hasn't been made unless the city has already made up their mind, and we're just going through the process to appease everybody, and then we're just going to close the book and we're going to move on from this. So as you can see, there's a number of different things that need to be discussed in greater depth. And as taxpayers, we have the right to understand that first. And I think that needs to be in a more intimate setting than a public hearing on a typical city council meeting. I think we need to have a formal presentation and truly understand what your expectations are and what is driving this change after 50 years. When you look into this a little bit, and I'm going to wrap my time up here, but when you look into this a little bit, the Municipal Management Association of New Hampshire, their legal counsel has said, and it's in writing, that once a town or a city starts to maintain a road like this, they own it. So if your counsel of that association is saying that, then that means that there's a lot of legal standing that goes behind this. So this is one of those situations where there's going to have to be restitution if the town is going to walk away from this because of the financial impacts on each and every taxpayer that has or holds a mortgage or is going to have a changed property value because of a city's decision.
Thanks very much, John. John, I'm wondering if you can send along the citation from the New Hampshire Municipal Association you mentioned.
Yep, I can pull that together.
Thanks very much. Okay. All right. Seeing that there's no one either in person or online who would like to speak right now, I'd like to close the public hearing at 7:54 p.m. Explain what's going to happen next, Mayor.
As far as this item, so people know. what's gonna happen.
So Council Littman has asked me to explain what's going to be next under item 22, unfinished business. 22E is the continued discussion of Plantation and Colonial Roads. And we'll be taking it up for deliberation as well as input from city staff at that point as well. Moving along to item number 14A. 14 was presentations and 14A is update on short-term rentals. Is Dean here? Welcome. Good to have you here. Would you like to lead our discussion on this? That'd be terrific.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council. I'm Dean Trefethen, Planning Director, Code Enforcement Director. I left on your desks this evening my printout here. I'll try to be as brief as possible. As you know, we passed a short-term lodging ordinance in 2019 and then made a small amendment in about 3 months after that. There are 3 notable trends that are ongoing that I want to draw your attention to, and I will go into greater detail on these trends as we get into this presentation a little bit more. The first one is the ordinance is working. We are currently receiving very few complaints about short-term rentals. Second trend is the platforms themselves are evolving. Airbnb, I always call it VRBO because that's how it started out. Now they're Verbo. They need to buy a vowel, I think, somewhere in there, but they are changing the way they are presenting themselves online and what they're doing with their host owners. And the third trend is it's not going away. And I think the city needs to evolve also. As I mentioned, the ordinance was passed in 2019, amended in February of 2020. I have attached the full ordinance on the last couple of pages of this handout. I'm not going to go through the entire ordinance. I'm going to touch on just a few highlights here. It is allowed in the commercial resort and the shorefront residential zones. And in some of the other zones, if it is owner occupied or it has been done for more than 5 years, and in some seasonal camps. I give you a quick summary of the process and the requirements that we use to do our permits.
Dean, can you, I'm sorry.
Sure.
Can you, there's no page numbers on this. Can you reference where we're at here?
I'm on the second page.
Okay.
Sorry.
Gotcha.
The process for obtaining a permit for short-term lodging is property owner would apply. It's a $250 permit fee. The department reviews the application and determines whether they're eligible or not. We do an inspection, and then we notify the property owner whether they've been approved or not. And we also notify the direct abutters about the approval of the permit. And part of that notification also tells the abutters what the process is for them to make complaints if they have any. As you know, before we adopted this, we were having a kind of a mishmash way of people complaining, and we wanted to make it very clear, if you're going to complain, this is the way it needs to be done. I listed here the 8 different things that we inspect for when we go out and do our inspections. No big items here that I don't think would surprise anyone. A couple of key points here is that basement space cannot be used for sleeping areas unless it has actual accepted fire code egress. And the other biggie here that's kind of surprises people is the requirement to have a fire extinguisher in the kitchen that is visible. It's not tucked under the sink. It's not in the food pantry. So when you have a fire and you've been there for 3 hours in this unit, you know where the fire extinguisher is. It's right there. And we also check on parking. So those are the highlights of the inspection. Moving on to page 3. Since adoption, the city has issued permits to approximately 60 properties. That number is ongoing. We have granted special exceptions to 7 properties. As I mentioned before, we have had no official complaints about any property that has a permit We have had complaints about some properties that do not have permits, and we follow up with those on enforcement. But for the properties that do have a permit, we have not had any complaints. That goes back to my earlier statement of the ordinance is working, and I'll go into that a little bit more in a second here. There have been no applications denied. Everybody that's applied has either been approved or they have withdrawn their application after we've had a discussion with them about what the requirements are and what the process that they may have to go through to try to get the permit approved if they don't meet the exact criteria. Data indicates that there are 275 to 300 properties engaged in short-term lodging in the city presently. We've had discussions with two different outside companies, and this is both of them have come up with the same kind of information. So if you look at the 60 properties that we have with permits and approximately 300 properties that are engaged in this, we have a ways to go.
About 20, you're about 20%, right? So I guess that's the area of opportunity that we should be focusing on to some extent here.
Correct. Moving on to the next page, starts with trend number 1. The ordinance is working. There's, as I said, no complaints at permitted properties. There is a general awareness of ordinance in certain areas. Those areas are places that currently have, it's either a condo association or a homeowners association type situation. Aqua Vista, South Down, the places along Weirs Boulevard, et cetera. Their associations have had discussions with their members that, you know, this is a requirement, and some of these associations don't allow short-term rentals to begin with. Some do. So they are very aware. Doesn't mean that they're necessarily all complying, but they are all very aware of it. However, as you can tell by the number of people that we still need to reach out to, there is more awareness that is needed. Trend number 2, the platforms are evolving. The platforms are very aware of community pushback, not just here, but elsewhere in the country. They have embarked over the past year or two an effort to educate their hosts on their responsibilities, i.e. the property owners. They have gone out and banned party house type listings. As you know, before we enacted this, we had a couple of homes in the city that were advertising themselves as a party house, great place to have your wedding party go and do their bachelor or bachelorette party. Nobody apparently thought that anything could go wrong with that scenario. So they have gone out of the way to try to, they don't allow you to advertise yourself as a party house because they know this leads to problems, and they know it leads to problems in the community. And they also know it leads to the pushback in the community that they've been experiencing. It is in their best interest to be a good citizen. So they are evolving, they are educating their hosts. Trend number 3, it's not going away, so the city needs to evolve as well. This kind of activity is not just for vacations. It is used by business travelers, professionals, families of all types for all kinds of reasons. Just anecdotal, we hear about people who come up here on business trips. They come up here because of a family funeral, and they don't want to stay in a motel or a hotel. They want to be in something a little more homey. We've had 2 or 3 properties in the city that have been used by the contractors that are doing the work for Comcast to install their new lines. They come up for 2 or 3 months at a time, and it's very, very difficult to get a rental for a short period of time like that. So they're doing the short-term rental. So it's just not for vacations. Our initial fears generally have not been realized. We were afraid a couple of years ago that the concept of buying a property strictly for the purpose of renting it out for short-term rental, therefore eliminating properties from use year-round. As you know, we have a housing shortage, as does most places in New Hampshire. Where ours is maybe a little more enhanced because of our seasonal nature and those kinds of things. But I don't see the indication that there is a lot of that going on. There is some. I'm not going to say that there is none, but we do not see the indication that There is a lot of that going on. COVID has made the short-term rental a stronger consideration for people. Last year, when the hotels and the motels were closed because of COVID restrictions, the short-term rentals were open. People still wanted to vacation, and they viewed it as a way of being able to go someplace and be on vacation, do their business trips, whatever it takes, but yet be isolated, be socially distant, et cetera. So if anything, COVID has made the concept even stronger. Our current ordinance, well-intended, don't misunderstand what I'm saying here, well-intended. It is slightly confusing and is viewed by some as overly restrictive, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a second. We do need to enhance our enforcement capabilities. As I mentioned, we have been talking with a couple of companies that this is what they specialize in. They scour the internet for the various listings on the various platforms. They match up the data that they find with other forms of data. For instance, real estate listings, a house that's been for sale, you have the pictures, there's the living room, there's the front entry, there's the backyard. Lo and behold, the exact same pictures are on the Airbnb listing or the Verbo listing or whatever, and they match those pictures up and they can identify the actual property. Because when you go to Airbnb, they don't say 123 Main Street, they just say Laconia. So they have to do some type of a matchup, and they have a whole bunch of ways way beyond capability of my understanding, but at any rate, we have talked with two different companies that specialize in this kind of thing. And as I mentioned, both of them came up with approximately 275 to 300 properties in the city that were doing it. So I'm a little bit confidence factor here that the processes work, because they sort of came up with the same kind of numbers. They weren't exact, but they were the same kind of numbers. And to hire a company to do that, and they do a whole number of things other than just identify the properties. They will help us in our enforcement. They will help us with tracking who's up for renewal. They even offer complaint systems if we want to do those different things. They offer a number of different options. Price point goes up and down depending upon which options you choose to use. There are approximately 18 to 22,000 a year, depending upon the options. And one way to fund that, in addition to an increased number of people having the permit, would be to also to increase the permit fee. Now, one thing I want to point out about the 275 to 300 properties that have been identified, a lot of them are in sections of the city that do not allow short-term rentals. Unless we do something to change that fact, we're not going to be collecting very much in revenue from those properties. But we will know about them, and we will be able to do enforcement, and we'll get to that point.
So you'll be able to cease their operations essentially if they became aware of it. But it seems to me, instead of increase, I'd hate to increase the permit fee to those 60 people that have complied the way we've asked them to. It seems to me that I'd rather hire the outside company and broaden the base. If you doubled that to 120, you'd go up to about $30,000 in permit fees coming into the city, which would more than cover that. So
correct.
Okay.
And Dean, the permit fee at $250 is for a 2-year period, though, so it's not.
Okay.
annually.
Yep.
All right. So it wouldn't
when
take that much
when you
more.
do look at the cost of an average night stay, to have basically $125 a year for a permit, and for most properties is not even the cost of one night stay for a property owner. So
Sure. It sounds perfectly reasonable, but I guess my inclination would be broaden the base first and see where it leads us.
Yep. Moving on to the next page, starts with suggested changes in the ordinance. We have a couple of wording changes that we need to do for clarity. The first one is we have a section that allows for an owner occupied situation, and if the owner is occupying the residency for 150 days a year or more, i.e. resides in the structure, then they can do short-term rentals. There's a couple other conditions they have to meet, but that's the basics there. The term resides is a little ambiguous. We need to find another way of describing the situation, and what has occurred is we've had 3 or 4 potential permittees who have gotten very creative with their calendars, and they've sat down with their calendar and they say, okay, I'm here on this Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and I'm here this Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and they go through the entire year and they come up with 150 days. And they say, see, I reside there 150 days. Problem is their tax bill goes to North Reading, Massachusetts. That's where they register the car. That's where they're registered to vote. All this stuff is online, by the way. It's very easy for us to see that stuff.
Right. Right.
And when we point that out to them, we know they don't reside there. This is their second home. And that was not the intention of the owner occupied scenario.
Mm-hmm.
It was really intended for people who live here, not necessarily year round, but they call home, they vote here, they register their cars here. This is their home. That was the intention. So we need to strengthen that word a little bit. The special exception that is concerns the 5 years. If you've been doing it for 5 years or more, it's been a little hard to implement in some cases because properties change hands. Getting the information from the previous owner, how many times they rented, those kinds of things over the past 5 years has been problematic for the current owners. So there's an issue there. Or maybe we want to change it so that if it does change ownership, then the 5-year thing goes away. So that's one thing to consider. There's a couple of ways of looking at that. And then, of course, we have the special exception provision concerning community benefit, which was intended to help one property, which was the property owned by the people who run the Playhouse. There's been a couple of the people that have tried to use that provision and have not been successful for the special exception. I think that is something we need to look at. To go even further, I would like to go back to what we as a department proposed originally 2+ years ago, and that was to allow it in basically all the residential zones, the RS, the RG, the RR1, and the UC zones. Understanding that it's happening now, is that opportunity for increased compliance. And then going back to the situation of, for the people who do have permits, we have not had complaints from abutters. And I think the reason for that is because when we go through the permit process, it becomes very clear to the property owner what their responsibilities are. And that we are going to be looking and we are going to be checking. And if they are not willing to comply for whatever reason, that we have the 3 strikes and you're out provision in the ordinance. They have the possibility of losing their income source if they do not comply. So I think those are the reasons that we haven't had any complaints. Is people really realize, the owners of the property now realize that we're watching, people are paying attention, those kinds of things. I would also advocate that we probably need to eliminate, if we do that, we can then eliminate the sections that are confusing to folks in terms of the special exceptions, the seasonal situation, and the owner occupied. I leave that for your thought, something to consider. And then the rest of the paper is the complete ordinance. And I'd be more than happy, anytime anybody wants to call me up or send me an email, more than happy to answer any of your questions. And of course, I'll be more than happy to at this moment.
Thanks very much, Dean. That was very thorough, and this was a significant task for us to undertake a couple of years ago. So yeah, nice job getting it up and off the ground and framed the way I think consistent with our intentions. But I think you're right. It is now probably time to revisit and look for ways to improve here. I don't have any questions. I think my suggestion, and I'd ask for some feedback on the council, is maybe this would be appropriate for government operations and ordinances to do a little work on this. And I'd like to refer it to that committee. Putting a lot on your plate tonight, Councilor Susie. But I think that would be the appropriate place to continue these discussions and work with Dean and looking for areas of opportunity here to improve the document. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Dean.
Thank you.
Okay. moving right along right now under item 15, which is the mayor's report. And if I'm not mistaken, we've got some people from Iron Man in the back. I'm happy to defer my comments. Welcome. And I think all of you know the Iron Man Timberman was back here this weekend as guests of the city. And I'd love to get maybe just introduce yourselves, reintroduce yourselves for the record, and get a little briefing on how things went.
Sure. You want to go first?
Ladies.
My name is Audra Tassone, and I'm the Executive Director for the Ironman Foundation. What I would like to say personally is to thank everybody. I remember when I approached Mayor Hosmer last December about asking him what his thoughts were about bringing Timberman back or the Ironman back. And he thought it was a great idea. So from just a casual conversation over coffee, we were able to turn this into an actual event. So Mayor Hosmer, I would like to personally thank you and the team for supporting us. Scott, thank you very much for everything. I'm going to leave that for you to.
Yeah, I would echo that. Look, we've had the opportunity to work in hundreds of events and almost as many cities. The cooperation here is phenomenal. Amy, her team with Parks and Rec, Wes and Brian with Public Works, Lieutenant Noyes and Captain Finogle, amazing, and Fire Chief Beatty have been tremendous. Collaboration and cooperation in a pretty short time to pull an event like this off has been amazing. We cannot wait to do it again. Laconia is our new home.
Thanks very much. That's great. I think that certainly, Scott, much credit goes to you and your team pulling people together here on short notice to put together an event. I had the utmost confidence we could do it because we do Laconia Motorcycle Week for the past 98 years. No doubt we could do this. Can you give us some sense of how many people signed up? Give me some sense of attendance, maybe areas, states or countries covered. I certainly know when I was down there during the day and listening to people start off or come through the finish line, it seemed like there were an awful lot of states that the athletes were coming from, as well as some different countries. Also, I didn't know that we had world champions who joined us, female world champions who joined us this weekend until I was there at the beach first thing in the morning, and Olympians as well, which was pretty remarkable. So I don't know if you have any information on that.
Sure, absolutely. So we had 23 pro women athletes here. So this is what they do for a living. So Timberman had a $25,000 pro purse, and that's what they were competing for. So all in total, we had over 1,300 people registered, and with spectators, there was 2,000 that attended. So because of the Delta variance, numbers are a little lower than the norm, but we anticipated that. So moving forward, we know that the numbers are will double.
Good.
And then the states we had, I'm trying to remember.
I don't have a number offhand. I
I know-
spoke to a number of guest families. I spoke to some people from Florida, from California, certainly
Brazil.
Yes,
We
and
had-
I heard quite a few French accents, which I presume are friends of the North.
Yeah.
Certainly a large regional draw, and I'm aware of some Midwestern states as well.
And I can get that information and I can send it out to both you and Scott just to see what other countries are represented here.
Yeah, I think that would be a great report to get if you have it. I think it's I think our idea in getting behind this at one point was to open the city up to people who maybe have never been here before. And I know I spoke to a number of athletes who had been here in the months prior to this to sort of get ready for the race. So it wasn't their first trip to Laconia or the Lakes region, which was really nice to hear. And I also want to say to your team, thanks very much for your organization in that I went through downtown last night and downtown was all cleared up. You wouldn't even know the Ironman had finished there just a couple hours before. I was out at Opeechee and the middle school, not only last night, but early this morning. I think I saw you, Tim, on a forklift out there. So, it seems to have been cleaned up very well. And I think that was our expectation as well. So thanks for fulfilling that expectation that our city is left in just as good a shape after the event is over. So thanks. I don't know if anybody has any questions or feedback for these folks as well.
Just thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. I mean, we also, and one thing to note too, out of all the Ironman events that have been this year, this one had the most amount of volunteers. So everybody came out and supported the event, which was incredible. So the feedback we've been receiving is very positive, and people, the volunteers are already thinking about what they want to do next and where they want to be. So we're definitely, to Tim's point, we're definitely looking forward to coming back next year.
Right. Now we've got time to plan, right? Yeah, which is fair. Go ahead, Scott.
I want to thank you both and your organization. Certainly, we've got a great team in helping put together these special events, and they were equally impressed with your team. So talking to all of my folks, especially Chief Biotti, who oversaw the Emergency Operations Center, which not only covered public safety in Laconia, they were coordinating with Lakes Region Mutual Fire Aid and the other public safety departments from here down to Loudon and back, which was the bicycle component. And up and down the line, they were extremely impressed with the cooperation and knowledge of your team, especially the two that you had in the EOC. So as one who was down poking around at Opeechee yesterday, where I ran into Tim, and then saw you, Audra, downtown, and then back in my neighborhood doing some yard work in the afternoon in between the raindrops, there was a volunteer station the street over where the running part was coming up at mile 12 roughly. And those volunteers, I could still hear them whooping and cheering until like 3:30 in the afternoon for 7 hours into their race. You know, the elite people had gone by and they're still out there, you know, cheering them on. So it was a great event, and we look forward to having you back.
Great, thank you. And again, Mayor Hosmer, thank you very much for listening to my crazy idea and everybody allowing this to happen. We appreciate it.
Good. Thanks very much, Tim. Thanks, Audra. Appreciate it. Look forward. Moving right along to council comments. Do we have any comments from the council tonight? Seeing none, how about committee reports or liaison reports? We'll bunch those together. Does anybody have a committee report or liaison report? Seeing none, what I would like to do right now is just pause, take a recess just for hopefully less than 5 minutes. I'll wait for Councilor Cheney to come back, and I may join him down the hallway. So just a couple of minutes. We'll be right back. Now would be the appropriate time for citizens to comment on current agenda items. Step forward or raise your hand on Zoom.
None of our.
Shocked. Okay. We do? Oh, I didn't see you raise your hand. No, but it is coming up. Okay. All right. So where did you want to?
We wanted to,
Right now or right
yeah,
after the city
I
manager?
think we could take it now. Is what I
22
suggest.
weeks, right?
Yeah.
Go
So
ahead.
what I would like to do though, is move item number 22E, which is continued discussion on Plantation and Colonial Roads up to right now. So I know there's a crowd of people here and I don't want to have you wait excessively long. I think now would be the appropriate time to address this. Although I'm sure you'd love to sit here and listen to winter maintenance fund discussions and clean water. So all of you in our packet, pages number 43 and 44, we have a memorandum from Wes Anderson. And how would you like to take the top level discussion on this to get us started here, or the overview, or should we defer to Wes? How would you like to handle it?
No, I think, Mr. Mayor, I will, and I don't think, obviously with the time of the night and the agenda in front of us, tonight's the opportunity to go to a full back and forth Q&A, but we
Yeah.
are certainly willing and want to do that. So I think I'd just like to provide a little bit of basic points for the folks in the audience and the council, and then maybe turn it back to the council for discussion. So first and foremost, we are absolutely willing to sit down and have an informal meeting and a session that's not in council chambers. We did that once, I think it was September or October of 2018, Wes. I don't know if some of the folks here attended, but we did do it at the Weirs Community Center. We did it on a Friday night, like at 6:30 or 7 o'clock, so that we could get folks who were just weekenders up here. We tried to make it convenient. We had, I want to say, Dean Trefethan, our planning director, was in attendance. Wes Anderson, Public Works Director, Krista Larson, our Assistant Public Works Director, and I'm not sure if we had another staff person there or not, but you at least had 4 people there. We probably had about 30 to 40 people, if I recall, in the room. So what I would offer to any of you who either were at the meeting or were not at that meeting, if you would like to get a copy of the PowerPoint presentation that was presented that night, we don't have it here tonight, but if you want to send an email, I would have you send the email to cityclerk@laconianh.gov. You can also find that very easily on the city website under the city clerk department, but just send an email and say, Plantation PowerPoint or something, and we'll get you on a list and get it to you so you can at least see the background that was presented in that meeting a couple of years ago now. The reason this has slowed a little bit, Mr. Mayor, is really because of COVID. We knew it was going to be an issue that was going to turn on a lot of people, and as we were getting ready to roll, we hit to COVID, and we didn't think this was a topic that could be handled easily on Zoom. It's a challenging topic and we get that, but yes, we are absolutely willing to have a meeting and discuss those types of things as people formulate the question. What the real basis is here, just to hopefully plant a little bit of information for the next time we do meet, is that the difference between this road and another city road or another city street is we know this to be privately owned, and that is the distinction. We know who owns this road. This was never formally completed as a road. It was never formally accepted by the city. We know who the property owner is. As an older city, we do have some ownership confusion, lack of details going back 50, 100 years. Some things that started out as glorified cow paths evolved, developments, extended off of certain roads that were never formally approved. A number of ways roads get built, but it doesn't mean that they're all city streets or were accepted. And again, in this particular case, it is not about the city trying to say, can I save $1 or $2, or can I get this off of our maintenance? New Hampshire state law does not allow public funds to be spent on private roads, and that's the basis for this. We're not singling out your roads. As the council knows, we've identified 40 or 50 roads throughout the city that we are going through this process and working with various neighbors on, and we certainly want to work with you. So that's the reason behind the city looking to do this. A couple of straight facts that I don't have to tell you. You've got a very steep incline on the roads on Colonial Plantation coming down, and they were never built with the proper structure. I can't speak to why it got paved, and anecdotally, does that sound true of what might have happened 20 years ago? Sure. Before my time here, before Wes's time here. But that road obviously does not have a proper foundation, a proper base. So whatever pavement went on there deteriorated over time because those were the conditions and it was not built to a proper road standard. I don't have to share with you as well, and for counselors and the mayor who's traveled up there, that there are significant drainage issues there. And with some of these heavier weather events that we are having right now, the washouts are getting more and more severe. And more of that material is coming down onto 11B and crossing the road because there's just a non-existent or a very poor drainage system that probably just has made its way or eroded or created its own path over time. It was not designed and built because the road was never designed and built. So going forward, that is a concern. So those are the reasons that we know it's privately owned. We know there's not a quality road base. We know there's not proper drainage in there. That is the reason that the city is really looking at this and saying, it's not something we should be maintaining. I'm not going to argue the point of if you've maintained a road for a certain number of years, now you own it for perpetuity. We'll wait till we see what Mr. Diwali, I believe it was, can provide for a legal opinion that he received, and we can certainly review that and discuss that with our legal counsel. So I'm not discounting it, but I'm not saying I'm ready to agree that once we maintained it, we do own it. So going forward, even we all know that there's higher standards with discharge for stormwater runoff and erosion and all of those things. So whether it's mandates that will be coming down in the future through EPA, Environmental Protection Agency at the federal level, or possibly even through the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services, our state agency that regulates that, there are going to be more significant costly requirements on how neighborhoods, roads, communities catch and treat their stormwater runoff so that you're not getting the silt and the sediment and the washout. So yes, Public Works has been maintaining this. We've discovered the private ownership. So that's what drove the start of this conversation in 2018. We've continued to maintain that. No one is rushing anything. No one's looking to decide anything tonight. But we do need to have a very realistic, open and honest conversation about where this goes forward. We did put some rough numbers together in 2018 that are part of that PowerPoint for what Attorney Philpott was talking about a betterment assessment. And I don't know those numbers off the top of my head, but we was based on, distance of roadway for Plantation and Colonial. And I'm going to look at West. To my knowledge, we have never maintained heritage. Is that correct? Correct. Okay, so we're strictly talking about Plantation and Colonial as roads that we have provided maintenance on. Heritage, again, to my understanding and Wes's understanding, has never been maintained. Yes. So we have some estimates that are a couple of years old now, but that could at least be a basis for talking about a betterment. We are tied a little bit because I believe betterment assessment. So a betterment assessment is people in our neighborhood get together and want to extend the sewer line for the common good, and they're willing to pay the cost over a period of time, and in essence, be on the hook for repaying the bond. Folks can also do that to upgrade their street to bring it to a standard where the city would accept it. And then the city would do the maintenance because now we're accepting the street that's built with a base, built with asphalt, has drainage system in, and then the city would accept it and take it over and maintain it going forward. So that's what a betterment does. It allows a neighborhood or a community or a street to come together, work with the city on being able to leverage funds, as Attorney Philpott said, at relatively inexpensive interest cost at this time. But I think we're limited by a 10-year maximum on those bonds on the betterment. I don't think they can go out for 20 or 30 years on that. So there are some limitations. We can run some numbers and make it work. Another woman, and I'm not going to try to figure out the name here, I believe she left, but asked, can we identify what it costs the city on an annual basis to go in and reclaim after heavy rains and do the plowing and that type of stuff? We track that so we can. I don't have that number off the top of my head tonight, but we can certainly look at that and say, over the last 3, 4, 5 years, on an average number of years, we go out there after 8 rain events and bring the material back up and try to make the roads passable. And how many times during storms do we go and plow and that type of stuff. That really is a Band-Aid approach, though. I mean, I don't have to tell you who lived there that as these weather events get more and more severe, the drainage gullies, get worn in, and there are some driveways there that people have challenges getting into after a heavy event because of the rain. So the road really needs better attention than a Band-Aid approach. And is there a middle, halfway meeting that can be discussed, of what that might look like and what that might cost? Sure, we could look at all of that. So those are the general answers for tonight. And again, I don't think the council is looking to make any decisions tonight. And we weren't looking to do anything because we were talking about a date of 2024, and that's not etched in stone. We're certainly willing as staff to meet at times that are convenient for the neighbors. But that's some basic information that I hope you can go away with tonight and say, it's not the city trying to save a buck. It's not the city trying to walk away from something and they don't want to do anymore. This is privately owned, and it's listed in our staff report tonight that the agenda is available online as to who owns the property. I mean, it's there. We know it. So that's the difference between this road and some other streets. So I'll stop there, Mr. Mayor, and see where you might like to go with this.
Well, thanks very much, Scott. And I will say first and foremost, the people who spoke tonight, either online or in person, it's tough not to feel a degree of empathy for the situation that they find themselves in right now. Certainly thinking about, I lived at the end of that road for almost 25 years, so I was very familiar with it and would ride my bike up there, and I would also see the runoff after storms. And, long before I got involved with the city council here, I was just always wondered what was going on with that road. And so it takes a ride up there on occasion. I think the homeowners are in a tough situation. I also think that this has probably been, I don't like the term, but the city maybe has kicked the can down the road for quite some time because it's a tough decision about what you do with this. And I'm certainly pleased with the fact that the city was able to go up there and grade and maintain the road and make it passable, because I think the last thing you want to do is, particularly when you're dealing with vulnerable population, whether it's senior citizens or otherwise, they're living on that road, and it's difficult to get emergency vehicles there. And you're concerned about a bad snowstorm or a washout and ruts of that sort, preventing the emergency vehicles from getting up there. I think part of the responsibility of the city too is to say, well, we need to protect our investment in our vehicles and our men and women that serve on these vehicles as well. So we're trying to balance how we should handle this. But I would agree with Councilor Lippman, who mentioned to me that I don't think this should be an A or B option here. I think what we need to do is figure out what happened over the years. Why maybe some homeowners were led to believe that this was a road that would be regularly, consistently maintained by the city. And, was the city doing that as a convenience to some extent, or not a convenience, but a courtesy, or were they obligated? I'm interested to see the legal opinion that Mr. Diwali is going to provide with us here. But I think somewhere these are, the citizens are like our customers here. They are the taxpayers here. They have an expectation and should have an expectation that we're attentive to their needs here. I don't know where that leads us as far as the decision goes, but I think this needs to, much like the parking garage, I guess, I think it's about time we dug in a little bit here and tried to find something that makes sense for the city and also respects the private property owners and taxpayers' interest for those living there. And I don't know what that looks like right now, but I think it's long past time that we continue to push this off for another council, another mayor, another city manager. I think I'd like to take that next step, whatever it looks like, to convene a working group here to make this a high priority over the next few months, probably leading into the next year to resolve it.
Could I ask one more thing, Mr. Mayor?
Sure.
If folks are contacting the city clerk, could you also just let your neighbors know that document's available and encourage your neighbors to request a copy? And then also, if you're doing that, just something simple about the best day of the week and or time for you collectively in the neighborhood to meet. We're probably not going to be able to pick a time that pleases everybody, but if everyone said, Wednesdays at 5 work great, and that's where the majority was, we would obviously look to accommodate that. So if you can just give us some simple guidance as to what day and or time would work best, that would be helpful in us trying to do that. But please reach out to your neighbors and encourage them to chime in as well, so we can get the best representation from your neighborhood.
Counselor Felch, I know this is in your ward.
Yes, and I definitely would like to see a meeting scheduled. All the numbers and information that you've mentioned, that they've mentioned, get together. I'd also like to see if we can find it, the original plans for that development and any information we have on that. But yeah, definitely we need to have a meeting. I will be there. So, and I think that's our beginning steps. So,
Yeah, I've worked with John Dwally on,
Yes,
other
I've talked to
issues.
him many
He's, I think he's, so anyway, I look forward to working with him. I think
Yes,
he's
me
really
too.
bright and thoughtful on this. Counselor Cheney, do you have some input? Thank you.
I have a couple of things. I wanted to ask, have we approached this owner of the property and asked about his willingness to turn the property over to the city?
I don't believe we have made that specific ask, mostly because it's a significant cost if we were to accept it and then have the city fund construction of a road there. But I do know that at the meeting at the Weirs in 2018, that the owner's attorney was present. I don't know if that attorney is still engaged by the property owner, but the owner's attorney at the time, and maybe still currently, was at that meeting and heard and stayed for the entire meeting.
Well, I hope we can approach him, because buying the road as opposed to having someone gift the city the road would save us some funds. I'm looking forward to hearing about the cost estimate for bringing the road up to standard, but I'd also like to see the cost estimate to continue to maintain it the way it is. And finally, I would ask if there's anything in the city ordinance or law that prohibits the council from accepting the road in the condition that it's in now. I understand we normally want to accept it at our standards, but could we accept it in the condition it's in now and at least maintain it the way it is now until such time as we can afford to fix it?
So we did enact a process. We worked with our legal counsel a couple of years ago on some of these private roads, and I want to say we got creative in a good way, and we came up with a process of accepting a road as is with some stipulations. And the best best field trip or viewing point any of you could take is to go out to the Methodist campground out in the Weirs up off of Centenary Avenue, where there's all the little glorified cow paths from a logging company, right, Wes? Back in the day, those were logging camps, and a logging charter of some sort was out there. And again, one of those gray areas of ownership, because all those little roads were owned by a logging entity that went bankrupt or dissolved or went away, and the history, and they were never accepted by the city. So we are in the process of working with those streets to do what we call an accept as is. And the simplest way I can describe accept as is that the condition of your road right now, with basic maintenance on the city's part, is how we would keep it and maintain it going forward. So in the Methodist campground area, there's not the proper base. The road is probably only 15 feet wide. It's not, a 2-lane, 22-foot road. There's no drainage out there. That would be how we would propose to maintain it. So basically, we're never going to dig this up and put 4 inches of gravel and 2 inches of asphalt and put a drainage system in there. It also requires that the property owners agree to work with the city and sign off. I'm going to butcher the language here, Wes. The rights to the center of the road is basically how it works out. And we need unanimous participation, because if we're halfway up a road and you've got a couple of owners who say, no, I prefer this to be private, I'm not going to sign the documents to grant you this, we're stuck. And we've run into that in a couple of the roads in Weirs, the Methodist campground, where 1 or 2 owners, for whatever reason, have said, no, I don't want to do this. I think right now we've got about 5 streets where we've got 100% participation, 4 or 5 streets where we've got 100% of the owners who've said, yeah, that sounds great to us. We'll work with it, accept as is. So to your point of, can we do that? yes, but I don't want to leave people here with the thought of in 5 years when we have the money, we're going to go put $3 million into it. It would mean that the council could vote with all of the abutters approval in legal documents permission to accept as is, which would mean we would grade and plow and do the basic steps that you've been used to for X number of years.
Plus, plus with this one, we know who the owner is. With that case, there was no owner.
Correct. And in a lot of cases, we really need the help of the neighbors. We've called them street captains. So one person or two people, depending on the length of the street, have kind of volunteered to help rally the people. And when we don't get answers to letters and stuff, and we need someone to give their neighbor a nudge and say, hey, you got a letter and the city hasn't heard from you yet on whether you're going to get involved with this. You know, again, that's where we need neighbors kind of working with neighbors, communicating and helping us on that, because yours would be, this would be one of the longer roads if we were to go to that approach. So that's probably a long answer, but I think a good answer, hopefully.
And that does answer my question, and I'm pleased to hear that. I hope we can go forward with perhaps that as a basis. I mean, the folks are not looking just for the maintenance of their road. There's garbage collection and a lot of other things that are involved. So whatever we can come up with creatively to acquire that would be my vote.
So as far as a working group from the city, I would like to participate in it. I assume Councilor Felch, since it's in his district, and certainly Councilor Cheney, if this is something you might be interested in doing, you get back to me on that, but certainly your input would be appreciated too. But I'd like to lead that up. And I know Mr. Diwali just reached out to me and indicated he's happy to participate as well. So perhaps we can start to put something together.
Council Hamel ought
to. Yes. That's the running joke. When they don't show up at meeting, they get assigned to committees. But anyway, so thank you. I think we can move on from this. I think our next step then would be, I'll follow up with Mr. Diwali and you, Scott. And
please reach out to the city clerk and encourage your neighbors so we can get a working list of people as well.
And I'd also like to say, feel free to reach out to me anytime. I am your counselor and about anything, not just this. So
at any hour of the day or night.
I have a few, but I don't
Two in the
don't
morning.
have enough for everybody on me.
so I guess the next step would be, there'll be some outreach to all of you in that area and put together a group of people from your area that we can sit down and begin to hammer out what this looks like as far as working towards a resolution. Okay.
And if you look on the city website, my information's on there. So,
Mr. Mayor, I would just recommend that we table this tonight. So we've given it to some ending.
That's a brilliant idea. We're going to table it tonight. Is there a motion to table?
yes.
So made by Councilor Felch, seconded by Councilor Haynes. There's no discussion. All those in favor of that, indicate by raising their hands. That's 5 votes in the affirmative. It's been tabled and we are going to work on this and make it a priority. So thank you very much. Thank you. Rolling right along now to the city manager's report.
I
Turn it
will
over to you,
be
Mr.
very
Orange.
brief, Mr. Mayor, so we can complete our agenda tonight. Construction projects, we've done the staging on the Court Street Bridge project. Last week, we are getting ready to begin work in there right now. The intent is to be working in one lane and shifting over. So we've got the middle lane and one of the lanes open. So two-way traffic might shift. It might slow a little bit, but the intent is to have two-way traffic going there the overwhelming majority of the time. I'm looking at Wes because I know there was concern over where they started today just based on the weather forecast for the hurricane. So originally today was going to be the starting day, but because of the unknown with the weather, tomorrow they'll be there. The bridge is still scheduled to close completely because there is no way to detour or bypass around that on the day after Columbus Day, and there is by contract no more than a 30-day window. And we've worked with Evrox, who is the contractor on the state project with that. They were the same firm that did the bridge, over the train tracks and the weirs a year ago, April, and were very successful and not only met the deadline, but a couple days ahead of time. I'm not promising that can occur here, different bridges, different needs, but we've worked with them and they're responsive and understand. And I think right now they've already agreed to be working all Saturdays within that they've agreed to, and even extend later into the evening. And we're trying to incentivize that so we get the shortest closure as possible there. We're still working over in the Lakeport area, doing water and drainage on Clinton and Prospect. And we'll be moving forward on the Elm Street sewer project probably right after Labor Day. So those are the biggies. And on the second report, the monthly economic development report, Nancy has greatly corrected my error from last time. So the misinformation last time is corrected for the month of May. June numbers are there for unemployment, so a slight uptick across the board in both local, county, and state. And on the second page of that report, inflation has continued to run a little hot. So another month in the fives, 5.4% for the month of July. So at this point, we're around 3.67, 3.68% as far as inflation running year to date. And I will stop there. Take any questions anyone may have.
Yeah, just one quick, does it appear that Clinton Street Hill will be paved before winter?
Yes, right, at least.
If we don't get the full frost pavement, there will be
The top.
French patch to the way.
Okay.
So it'll be more than possible.
At least the base and solid and stuff, and we come back and do the final in the spring, depending on how the project continues.
Thank you.
Scott, the easement, water easement, is that in the works as far as Durkey Brook Bridge?
So the quick background is we went to court on that, right? We went to court on the easement for the one property on Court Street to get the water where we have it, infrastructure in the ground already. The letter certified mail was received. They had 30 days to respond. They responded with 2 days left in the 30-day window and did not grant the easement. So the attorney for the water department is now moving forward with the courts for a remedy there to, and he's trying to reach out to the other party and see if we can solve this without going to the courts. But we are looking to get a prescriptive grant, right, or easement, thank you. Because we've got infrastructure in the ground right there anyway, and whatever we're doing is just upgrading and replacing what's in the ground in the same location. And we are not impacting, other than the temporary impact of digging there, we are not impacting the use of the land for this property in question. There's no above ground structures that remain there at the end of the day. So unfortunately, talking with the property owner didn't work, trying to negotiate didn't work. They've responded and objected through the filing with the court. So now we will take the next step with the court. And Wes, if you've got any updates or any additional you want to add.
The attorney Fitzgerald, who represents the water department, was working with their attorney to come into an agreement to do it pending, whatever determination made by the court for the purchase of the easement.
Okay, so I guess my question is, that's not going to delay the project. Okay,
We're going to start with the drainage first.
all right. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Any other questions? All right, thank you very much, Scott.
Thank you.
All right, so we're moving on to item number 21 and 21A. It's our friend John DeWally. He's just on the road with us from Heritage Road, lot 170, 320, 23, involuntary lot merger and request to restore lots to their pre-merger status. The aforementioned lot was originally consisted of 2 lots, was involuntarily merged by the city under RSA 674:39 double small a. The property owner has the right to request of the governing body that these lots be restored to their pre-merger status. Attached tonight is a copy of the above mentioned RSA as well as a map showing the location of the property. If this request is approved by the council, lot number 170/320/23 would be restored to its pre-merger status of 2 individual lots. This report was submitted by Scott Myers. So if they're be looking for a motion and a move to approve the request by Mr. DeWally, owner of property on Heritage Road, lot number 170-320-23 to restore the property to its pre-merger status. So made by Counselor Felch, seconded by Counselor Haynes. Is that right? Is there any further discussion of this matter?
I just had the question of why the city forced the merger to begin with.
Are you looking at me?
So this was something that happened decades ago in basically all communities around the state. So when there were a lot of very small lots that had common ownership in terms of neatening up tax records and stuff, there was an opportunity to merge the lots together. And for no other reason than just a convenience. And the legislature recognized this, and back in about 2014 or 15, they created a window of opportunity for properties that this has occurred to, where no benefit of the merged lot had taken place, meaning you didn't build a house over the property line, or you didn't utilize a side setback or a rear setback that wouldn't have been there if these lots weren't merged. If that hadn't occurred and the lots were kind of in their raw state, they could unmerge them. And the legislature has extended this a couple of times, where this year, I believe it's on December 31st of this year, it finally sunsets and goes away. So it didn't just happen in Laconia, it happened in communities all across the state for that reason. And staff certainly supports the request to put them back into their original state.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Scott. Thank you, Counselor. Any further discussion on the motion that's on the table right now? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion, please indicate by raising your hand. That's 5 votes in the affirmative. That motion passes. Thank you. Moving on to item number 21B. Establishment of a welfare relief reserve amount and transfer of $50,000 into that account. This item was submitted by Scott Myers, City Manager. Just for the record and for clarification, the city currently does not maintain a reserve to mitigate the impact of unanticipated changes in the demand for welfare relief. Such demands could include environmental conditions such as an economic downturn or individual circumstances such as a client with special needs. Over the last 2 years, effective management of the welfare function and generous state and federal assistance programs have allowed the city to build a welfare relief fund totaling $50,000. It is proposed that these monies be transferred into a reserve account to allow for more effective management and accountability of the funds. Approval will reallocate the funds from the general fund to a reserve account. It is the recommendation that the welfare relief reserve account is established and that their $50,000 is transferred. Right now, I'll be looking for a motion to move to approve the establishment of said welfare fund. So made by Councilor Lippman, seconded by Councilor Susie. Is there any further discussion on the motion that's on the table right now?
I would just,
Go ahead.
I would just say that a number of the American Rescue Plan and other Family Relief Act, those benefits will be going away. And we could have a greater demand than we've had over the last 2 years. So I think having some reserve to manage against is a prudent thing to do, as it has been in things like health insurance and snow maintenance and what have you. So I support this.
That's Ginny.
I guess my only question, I think this is a great idea. My only question is, what happens? I mean, are we including in this that you have the right to draw funds out in an emergency? Or do you have to come to the council or?
So two things. So the council approved with the carry forward resolutions this year, the unspent money, the 50,000 from the welfare area. So that money already sits there just for ease of bookkeeping. If we move it into a reserve account, we don't have to carry it forward year after year after year. It goes into a reserve account and it stays there. Any removal of funds from there would require council approval. So we may come to you any given year and say, you know, this has happened unanticipated here. These programs stop. We're seeing more of a demand. We request to transfer money out. So it eases our bookkeeping, but council has full control over it.
A follow-up question for that, Scott, is do we have a document that shows all the reserve accounts that we might have in the city? If so, what are they? And it'd be nice to just sort of have a thumbnail of them every month, just to know where we stand.
I think we give you something close to that, and if not, we can expand upon it. But in the financial and operational trends, you'll see the balances in the health insurance stabilization, the winter maintenance account, the motorcycle week account, the TIFs.
Yeah.
If there's, we can certainly include this there, and
That would be great.
if there's others that we need to place there, we can just let us know and we can add to that list.
That'd be terrific. Thanks very much.
You're welcome.
So all those in favor of the motion that's on the table indicate by raising your hand. That's 5 votes in the affirmative and the motion passes. Thank you. Moving along to item number 21C, which is transfer of $83,000 to the winter maintenance stabilization reserve account. Fiscal year 2021 budget includes $83,000 carried forward from the prior fiscal year for the purpose of supplementing the existing winter maintenance stabilization reserve. The current balance in the reserve is $80,768. The addition of these funds will bring the total to $163,768. The purpose of this fund, much like the previous fund, is to mitigate the impact of severe winter storms in the city budget. Funds are available for transfer due to the milder than anticipated 2021 winter season. This was also submitted by the city manager. We're looking for a motion right now, and move to transfer $83,000 to the winter maintenance stabilization reserve account. So made by Councilor Littman, seconded by Councilor Haynes. Is there further discussion? Right on cue.
Okay. So the reserve fund will have $163,000 into it. That is not the winter budget. What you're saying, that is money that's put aside. So if there's a giant storm, we have some real big problems, that's extra money you could pull from to use if needed.
Yes.
That's
So winter weather and storm events, we can't control. So we budget our best estimate. Get a milder winter, we save money. That doesn't mean we're not going to pay for it next year or 2 years from now. So just by putting that money aside means we have a reserve. Again, with council approval, we can draw upon it. If we weren't able to have that reserve there, we might have to go into the street paving budget or the sidewalk budget or the drainage budget. And we all know that we need every dollar we can in those accounts. So to put some money away in reserve after a milder winter seems to make sense to not hurt other projects going forward.
It's kept the budget stable. It keeps the budget stable because then we can budget on an average amount. And if we have a year that's not an average, we can.
Yeah, we do a rolling average of what a year is, and then we know we've got a safety net, or if we don't need it all the funds particular year, we fund the safety net for the year we're going to need it. So
I just don't want to run to a point that this becomes $500,000.
nope, if it gets to that point, we can certainly put it to better work doing streets.
Thank you.
Yes.
The council can undo the reserves.
No, I'm sorry. Henry, go ahead.
No, the council can undo the reserves.
Sure.
I guess my question was, does this set this fund at 163,768, or can we change it, increase it next year? Because there's.
You can increase it. So this fund was set up, I believe, probably when I first started with the city, or maybe second year. But anyway, with Councilor Littman and the Finance Committee, we talked about, let's take some of the spiking out of a number of things we can't control. One of them being health insurance increases. So we try to always fund, to say a 4% health insurance increase. And if we get fortunate one year and we get a flat rate or only up 1%, we try to put some of that money aside that we would have spent anyway. So it kind of smooths out the spiking. And some of the things that we found that we can't control are weather, health insurance, and just because of the dynamics of COVID and the various programs that were mentioned that are now winding down, the welfare, we thought are prudent. And I think with discussions with Glenn and I, and certainly the council can chime in, we think that's a one-time expenditure until we see how it works. We're not looking to build that number to a much larger unless for some reason something unforeseen happens. So, but the winter maintenance being 160,000 really could all go in 1 year if you've got a real whopper of a year.
And there's not been very many weather events recently, have there?
No, but even though we haven't had the snow, well, we had that 136-inch storm this year, but we're getting a lot more of, and I'm not going to say it's attributable to one thing or the other. We get a lot more of icing and that fringe freezing, and those can just be just as labor intensive with the material and the overtime as a 36-inch, snow dump that comes down. So anyway.
Yeah, no, I think it's served us well in terms of being, we've done 17 budgets
Right.
in the tax cap, and
which is, yeah, right.
We're off to a good start.
Yeah, no, I think that's, I mean, I think that's what the tax cap forces you to do, is to look at aspects of budgeting long-term
Yeah.
to make sure that we can not run into that situation where we're jammed right up against the tax cap because of something we couldn't control. So I think it's a terrific idea. Okay, so we are at the point now, we're gonna have a vote. Yes, motion on the table. All those in favor of this motion indicate by raising your hand. It's 5 votes in the affirmative, and that motion passes. Thank you. Moving right along to item number 21D, which is the looking to amend the city code, chapter 235 zoning, to update section 22.7, authority to assess impact fees, amending the formula to collect only a portion of the established fee instead of the full amount. Wondering if you can maybe introduce this topic for us, Scott.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So back in the probably 2009, 2010 timeframe, somewhere in there, maybe even into 2011, the city worked with a paid consultant and the planning board to look at establishing baseline impact fees. And what an impact fee is, as new development comes online and the city grows, whether it's through business or commercial or residential, those new properties coming in have an impact on city services. So you get to a point where maybe you need an additional plow truck once you hit a certain critical mass. You might need an additional police cruiser to cover the areas in the city. In the schools, it might be an additional classroom or an additional teacher. So the impact fees were a way that new development coming in helps support the infrastructure that's been paid, that they come in and are using, but they help to contribute to it. So the city went through the study because the impact fees need to be reasonable and defendable. If someone challenges them, you just can't make up crazy numbers and throw them out there and say, this is what we're going to do. And came up with the numbers, and that is included in the second page of your packet. So back then they came up with what were recommended fees that were adopted by the city council, but they only chose to implement those fees at a 25% rate. And if you think of the timing back in 2011, just, starting to come out of a significant downturn in the economy, and the last thing the council wanted to do was to stifle, any type of housing or economic growth. So saw the value in the fees, implemented them at 25%. And that's where they've stayed now for the last 10 years. So without having to go, do new studies, the options available that seems to be reasonable is to increase the percentage of fees that allocated to collect. So, and they're based on the type of development. So if a retail or a food establishment or an office building came in, they by themselves are not impacting the school. So they don't pay impact fees on public schools or recreation. But a single family residential property or a multi-unit building is most likely going to impact schools, police, fire, recreation, roads, and library. Each one of those various components has a dollar amount attached to it. If we were implementing the full fee schedule today for everything at 100%, it would be about $7,600 would be the cost of an impact fee once a new single family residence got a certificate of occupancy, because that's when we collect it, is at the end of the process when a CO is issued. By only collecting it at the 25% rate now, we're collecting $1,907 as an impact fee, broken down proportionally by the various departments I just mentioned. So the planning board has recommended to the council that this be increased to start collecting the impact fees at a 50% level. They've recommended a date going out to April 1st of next year. So we have a chance to get information out to developers and builders and contractors and new projects that may be coming into us, so that they're not caught off guard that it just happened today, and they can build that into their price. And then also the recommendation from the planning board to the council was to increase it by 10% each year over the next 5 years until we got to a full 100% level of the impact fee implemented.
Councilor Littman.
So I think that, one of the values of the impact fee is that, the people who've been living here and paying taxes have supported a certain level of infrastructure. And it's that, like other things, it's a chance for them to share in the costs of things that have already in effect been invested in terms of the incremental impact of that. I do think that we're also in a housing situation where, you know, the affordability of housing is also an issue. So I think if I would support the first part of the recommendation from the planning board to go to the 50% level, because effectively with inflation and everything in 10 years, we're collecting, you know, half of probably what we were collecting at the beginning. Those projects that are already in motion would not be subject to this 50%. So it would be something known in advance. And I think we ought to take a 2-year hiatus after that to see whether it makes sense to continue to move on that in terms of what the impact is on the market. And so I don't think that the planning board was off base, but I do think that you know, it's not more than just collecting the fee, it's making sure that how it's impacting our housing market and the general economy here. So I would say take step one and evaluate the impact before we move forward further.
Councilor Susie, go right ahead.
So what you're saying, Harry, is go ahead with the 50%, go ahead with the 50% now, but 2 years from now, review it?
Yeah, as to whether we can, whether it makes sense to, I don't like something that's automatic where we don't take a second look at it. And I think we ought to collect some information, what the impact is. And I can go justify from going from 25% to 50%, because really, when you consider it being more than a decade since we've done it, you know, 50% is really the value of 25% when we implemented it.
I was just trying to get clarification. So you 50% and then 2 years from now, it comes up again.
Yeah.
Whether or not we're going to implement the following, another 10%, another 10%.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
I would agree with the 50% now, but I don't know if I'd put a timeline of 2 years or any amount of time. We can look at it at any time, whether it's a year from now, 2 years, 3 years.
I mean,
definitely agree with the 50%.
I mean, it takes, the only reason I said 2 years, it takes some time for a project. Even if you implement it next April, they have to complete the project and then you have to collect the fee. So to do it less than 2 years, you're not really getting any information which to make your next move on.
But I think the timeline of 2 years is a good idea because it makes us review it again instead of just sitting like it did for the last 10 years.
Well, it makes the council who, you know, whatever the makeup of the council is. And I think that's important to us, that it should be looked at without necessarily tying anybody's hands, but saying it might be prudent for them to
Just a
do that.
review.
Yeah, I mean, there's one thing that I appreciate the history of all of this, of the impact fees. The numbers are pretty significant, though, to go from 25 to 50%, you know, and I agree with Councilor Lippman. If one of the issues we have here in the city and certainly the state is housing, and is it affordable? And it's affordable to whom? Is it affordable to our teachers and our police officers and our firefighters and DPW workers? I mean, this is something that I think you have to take into consideration. It is a pass through, isn't it, to them ultimately?
It is, on the other hand, in terms of all the taxes and all the things we've all paid in for improvements in the city, someone who's coming in, brand new house, gets the benefit of that and hasn't shared, if you will, in what's already built in. So it's fair for them to participate to some level. Again, you know, there's a balance here between doing that. And I think, you know, from the history standpoint, when we looked at other communities that had implemented this, they had started at a much higher percentage. We started at 25%. It hasn't had much of a negative impact. I think, you know, you look at the housing market, it's very strong right now. And again, the value of the 25% is half of what it was, you know, more than a decade ago.
My question is, even though it's on our agenda and it's up for motions right now, does the council feel they have enough knowledge on these that they're comfortable in bringing it to a vote? Not to second guess you, I'm just wondering if this is a relatively new item for me to deal with here.
I have, you know, if
Hold on,
we
I
need more,
just want to make sure if
No,
you
I
need
think-
more time.
I'm just suggesting
pressure.
we don't need to act on it tonight. If we want to table it to take more time to consider it, I think that's certainly
Okay.
appropriate.
I appreciate that. And I'm just wondering if that might be an appropriate avenue to take tonight.
I'm okay with that.
All right, so a motion, who would make a motion to table? So made by Counselor Felch, seconded by Counselor Haynes. It's non-debatable. So all those in favor of the motion, 5 votes in the affirmative, that motion passes. This item is tabled.
Hey, Mr. Mayor, if I could, when you do bring it off the table, if you do move it along, the next step in the process is to move it to a public hearing anyway. So it's got 2 more weeks to percolate at that point.
Thank you. Moving on to item number 21H, which is the airport grant agreement. This involves a grant agreement between the Laconia Municipal Airport and the New Hampshire Department of Transportation Bureau of Aeronautics. New Hampshire DOT and Bureau of Aeronautics has offered a grant for the following: obstruction removal of on-airport and on-airport controlled properties, approximately 14.6 acres. And this will allow conduct an airport obstruction analysis, update stormwater pollution prevention plan. Fiscal impact of this grant. There is no fiscal impact for the city. The Laconia Municipal Airport is responsible for 5% of the total cost of the grant agreement. The Federal Aviation Administration covers 90%, and New Hampshire DOT, Bureau of Aeronautics, 5%. At a meeting on August 19, 2021, the Laconia Airport Authority approved the agreement and authorized the chair, Andrew Hosmer, to sign the agreement on behalf of the Laconia Airport. Now seeking authorization for Andrew Hosmer as mayor of the city to sign this. This was submitted by Marv Everson, airport manager. I'll be right now looking for a motion to authorize Andrew Hosmer, mayor of the city of Laconia, to sign grant SBG-09-15-2020 obstruction removal. So made by Counselor Cheney, seconded by Counselor Felch. Is there any further discussion of this matter? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion indicate by raising your hand. That's 5 votes in the affirmative. That motion passes. In the same vein, we have item number 21F on our agenda, which involves airport coronavirus relief grant program, state block grant agreement between Laconia Municipal Airport and the New Hampshire Department of Transportation, Bureau of Aeronautics. This grant is to prevent, prepare for, and respond to coronavirus. Funds provided under this grant must only be used for purposes directly related to Laconia Municipal Airport. Such purposes can include the reimbursement of an airport's operational and maintenance expenses or debt service payments. Fiscal impact: there is no fiscal impact for the city. The federal government is responsible for 100% of the grant. At a meeting on August 19, 2021, the Airport Authority approved the agreement and authorized the chair, Andrew Hosmer, to sign the agreement on behalf of the Laconia Airport Authority. Right now, I'll be looking for a motion to authorize Andrew Hosmer, mayor of the city of Laconia, to sign the grant agreement SBG 0918-2021. So made by Counselor Felch, seconded by Counselor Haynes. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion, please indicate by raising your hand. That's 5 votes in the affirmative. And that motion passes. Thank you, counselors. Moving along right now to unfinished business, which is the second reading of Resolution 2021-16 relative to authorized application for a $400,000 loan from the New Hampshire Clean Water State Revolving Loan Fund for the Elm Street Sewer Project and appropriating funds for the same. As you may remember, a resolution was approved by the City Council in 2020 authorizing the city manager to file an application with the New Hampshire CWSRF program for a $2 million loan to fund the Elm Street Sewer Project. A loan agreement was signed by the city on December 12, 2020 for $1,716,250. Bids were open for the project in July 26, 2021. The bid total exceeded the 2020 estimated construction cost by $600,000. The proposed amended loan amount will exceed the original $2 million appropriation by $400,000. New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services and the consultant, our city's consultant, have been seeing significant price increases in this year's bids associated with the increase in the cost of materials due to impact of the pandemic on manufacturers and other elements of the supply chain. Funding for the bond payment will come from the city's sanitary sewer fund. As we indicated earlier, approval will authorize borrowing of $400,000 at an interest rate somewhere between 2.0 and 2.37%, depending on the term, as determined by the Council and Finance Committee. City manager recommends approving this resolution and authorizing the city manager to amend the New Hampshire CWSRF loan amount by $400,000. This report was submitted by Krista Larson, Assistant Public Works Director. Anything you'd like to add to this at this point, Scott?
No, I think that pretty much covers it, Mr. Mayor.
I read it word for word.
That would be why.
We're gonna do the project. We gotta fund it. right?
Thank you, Henry. Yes, thanks for living right. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is move to waive a reading of this resolution in its entirety and to read by title only. So made by Counselor Cheney, seconded by Counselor Susie. Any further discussion? Seeing none on that matter, all those in favor? 5 votes in the affirmative, and that motion passes. The second motion we're looking for is to move a second reading of Resolution 2021-16. A resolution authorizing application for a $400,000 loan from the New Hampshire Clean Water State Revolving Loan Fund for the Elm Street Sewer Project and appropriating funds for the same. So made by Counselor Felch, seconded by Counselor Haynes. Is there any further discussion on this? Seeing none, all those in favor of this motion, please raise your hand. That's 5 votes in the affirmative. That motion passes. And finally, on this matter, we're looking for a motion to move to approve Resolution 2021-16, a resolution authorizing application for a $400,000 loan from the New Hampshire Clean Water State Revolving Loan Fund for the Elm Street Sewer Project and appropriating funds for the same. So made by Counselor Felch. Motion made by Counselor Felch, seconded by Counselor Haynes. Any further discussion on this third and final motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion, please indicate by raising your hand. That's 5 votes in the affirmative, and that motion passes. Going on to item 22B, perhaps, which is the status update on property located at 50 Church Street. Scott, do you want to just start that off?
Sure. Would you like a brief?
Where are we now with this?
Just where we are now. So the on the most recent things is the city council at a public meeting here entered into a purchase and sales agreement on the 23rd of April with K&M Holdings LLC for sale of the former Holy Trinity School property, which we're referencing as 50 Church Street, with several conditions on performance and that type of stuff. It was conditioned upon the applicant receiving land use approval, so he had started the process concurrently, actually, and worked with Dean Trefethen and his staff, and then the planning board. So on August 3rd, planning board granted conditional approval with some deadlines and conditions to be met. So the applicant has all approvals in place for the proposed plan that he is doing. And our city's attorney and Mr. Morissette's attorney are preparing the deed and hammering out final language for the closing on that property in the very near future.
Thanks very much, Scott. And I think it probably would serve us all well. And I'm going to just go over, I don't want to belabor some of these points, but I want to just go over some of the what transpired in regards to the this property, not only the school itself, but certainly our concerns about the church at one point, as well as the Buzzell House as well. And I think many of you will probably remember and probably were involved in. It was, if I'm not mistaken, on May the 5th of 2019, it came to light that the Diocese of Manchester had sold the entire parcel, which included the Buzzell House, the St. Joseph's Church, Buzzell House and the school and the parking lot behind St. Joseph's Church, as well as followed up shortly thereafter with an application to the city for a demolition permit of the St. Joseph's Church. Obviously, many things transpired shortly thereafter, which was a pretty vigorous pushback from the community as far as the demolition goes. At that point, because of the nature of the pushback, the diocese, the buyers walked away, the potential buyers walked away from the transaction with the Diocese of Manchester. At that point, I think the application for a demolition permit of St. Joseph's Church has been stagnant and just held. Right? I'm not sure there's any intention to go forward with it yet. I can't say that for sure, but the application remains. And I think it's still a concern for many people within the city, certainly is for mine, that that church remains standing. And I'm hopeful at some point the diocese might come to their senses and withdraw the permit. But that may not occur, and we may have to figure out what we're going to do about it to make sure that church is not demolished. Going back to 2019, and Mayor Engler was here at the time, there were a couple of things that we were particularly concerned about. And certainly one was we knew we were going to begin some work at the Colonial Theater. There were questions and concerns about, do we have adequate parking downtown to not only support the theater, which would be a 750-seat theater, but also I think we were also hedging our bets to some extent that downtown would see an economic rebound, and that more businesses would be downtown, and that we would want to encourage more foot traffic or bike riders or what have you, people downtown. The last thing we wanted to do is have people anxious to come downtown and visit our new places of business or our theater and find it frustrating to find a parking spot. Certainly, we hadn't even really begun to grapple in some respects with the parking garage, and we knew that it was very limited as far as the number of parking spaces available. We also knew that even with the limited number of parking spaces, people will tend to avoid the parking garage there. So, you know, I think many of us were concerned that we would spend a significant sum of money on the theater, not have adequate parking, and sort of that would be a sort of raining on the grand opening of the Colonial Theater to some extent. So when the original buyers backed out of the property, a number of us felt that was our opportunity as a city to step in there and perhaps secure the parking lot, which represented somewhere between 87 and 90 spaces that we could potentially add to our inventory downtown. We also knew that we probably were not inclined to have the city remain owners of the Buzzeel House, which was the rectory, that the idea would be to look at a potential purchase price for the entire property and deduct the sale price of the Buzzeel House, reducing the net amount that the city had committed to this. It was also a fairly well-known fact. I mean, I certainly knew it because of my involvement in with Holy Trinity for over a decade, that it would take a considerable investment just to keep that building functioning, either as a school or anything else. It was clear, and I think those of us, even before my time there, knew that it was long past time to replace the roof. The windows needed to be replaced. We had heating, ventilation, air conditioning. There's actually no air conditioning there, but heating and ventilation concerns there. We also had some concerns about potential asbestos in the building because it was so old. And I was part of, at least in the periphery of discussions about what Holy Trinity was going to do. Were they going to invest a sum of money in that and keep it a school? Or was the sum so much that it was preferable for them to move locations, which they eventually did, to the campus of St. Andre Bessette, and that's where they are right now. I was also familiar with a couple of private people who had indicated a desire to take a look at the building and perhaps renovate the building, and ultimately never made an offer on the building, simply because the estimate to do this type of work could have been anywhere from $500,000 on the cheap, if you will, to over $1 million. Just to get it ready to then make it into condominiums or apartments or whatever they wanted. So I can say quite confidently that when we discussed an opportunity to purchase this property, we never determined that that building was worth any significant sum of money, just because of what it needed. It was deferred maintenance for decades there. It was putting Band-Aids on a lot of the elements of that school, that building, when really it needed significant investment over time, and the school just was unable to do it. So I think during the course of our discussions when purchasing this property, if the number of $1.1 million to purchase the parking lot, the rectory, and the school, that was a number that the diocese held firm on, and we made a decision that we would offer that, and that amount of money. But from that, we estimated that we could deduct about $400,000, which we estimated to be the value of the resale, what would net us if we sold the rectory, the Buzzell House, bringing our net purchase price down to about $740,000. And when we divided that by the number of spaces that we would gain, came out to about $8,500 per space that we would be picking up. Ultimately, when the Buzzell House sold, it netted us about $460,000 or thereabouts, I think, which ultimately led us to a price per parking space for 87 spaces of about $7,800, which in the abstract may seem an awful lot for a parking space. But I think when you look around the state, you look around the community, or you look at the potential renovation refurbishment of the parking garage here, you realize that the price for a parking space, particularly when we have no other options in downtown, in the downtown area, the price was, I believe we all thought was a good investment on behalf of the downtown revitalization that was going on. And I agree with that. And I still do right now. So I just wanted to also bring to light that when we were entering into these negotiations, there were some, we were strictly compliant with RSA 91A and not just the letter of the law when we were discussing the possibility of making an offer and entering into negotiations for a purchase and sale. But I think it was the spirit of the law as well that we adhered to. But perhaps just as importantly was that there was a confidentiality expectation from the Diocese of Manchester that if we were to break that confidentiality, we may lose the opportunity to buy those parking spaces and really help our downtown businesses in the revitalization of our cultural and community quality of life there. So really, that just needs to be, I think, to go out there one more time. Not that anything was ever meant to be kept from the public. To the contrary, I think we were as a council, we were as forthright as we could and still maintain the opportunity to buy the property, save the church as best we could, and do what's right with the discretion that we had. So I just wanted to get that out there once again. For any questions that people may have or concerns that they may have, or anything that all of you may want to add to that. If my recollection is not consistent with yours, I'm certainly open to further discussions or edits to what I've offered tonight. But, you know, I still think it's and I hope you do as well, I think it's a good investment on the behalf of the city and what we're doing here, and certainly look forward to if there's a possibility to add to our housing stock with the renovation and what's going on with the Holy Trinity School. I think that's, you know, we come out in pretty good shape adding parking spaces in addition, additional housing stock. So I'll stop with my comments right there, but I thought it was worth revisiting.
And we should add, Mayor, that we put a piece of tax exempt property back on the tax roll.
Two pieces.
Two pieces. And certainly I've heard from one or two constituents about the sale price of the school. And I would add to your comments that the council talked about the possibility of tearing down the school. And the expense of that was substantial. Based on the fact we were having trouble finding anybody to buy the property at the time, there were several people who expressed interest, dragged on for months. But in the end, there was only one person who appeared to be willing to purchase the property. And that saved us the cost of tearing the place down and lugging it away. So
I think you're absolutely right too. I think there's really two good points. One, we put two pieces of property on the tax rolls that hadn't been the tax rolls for quite some time.
Yep.
And second of all, had we been forced to take that building down, we could either let it sit there and fall into itself, which would not be particularly wise, or we'd have to take it down, which means we would be responsible for the cost of remediation and pulling it away. And I think it would have been a mistake to pave that over and make more parking spaces. I just think it's a prime corner location on downtown, and I think we could do better by it. Thank you, Council Cheney. Is there anything else anybody would like to add at this point? No? Okay. Thank you for allowing me to revisit that. Moving on to item number 22C, which is review and discussion of an application for tax relief under RSA 79E for the property at 50 Church Street, the aforementioned property. Scott, could you lead us in that a little bit?
I will, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. So RSA 79E is one of the limited tools, if you will, in the toolkit that municipalities can adopt and choose to offer under state law. So 79E has some strict requirements, and it talks about people making a substantial investment in an existing building. It might be a historic building. If a building isn't able to be saved, a demo is allowed and then rebuild in the same location. But there needs to be a public benefit, and the public benefit is designed very specifically to talk about things like historical structures, building that might be vacant, underutilized, creating workforce housing, creating opportunities within downtown centers, village district centers, those types of things to enhance opportunities. And an applicant comes in as they're proposing the project, typically talking about what it is they're looking to do. Obviously, they work towards getting their land use approvals, but they also put an application into the city and request the tax relief in advance of their project. So generally speaking, 79E is meant to incentivize projects and maybe help bridge a gap for someone that they can invest their money, be building the project. And as they add value to the project, the first thing that would typically happen is we turn around and increase their taxes because they've added value to the property. 79E allows the council discretion to freeze taxes at a level of the value of the property as it stood before improvements happened to it. And then it allows a developer to put money into it, to get it occupied, get it rented, do whatever they need to do before a tax increase would set in. So it's one of the few tools that we do have. The city adopted it in 2012. Ironically, you've got two before you tonight, are the first two applications that we received in 8 or 9 years. But it's used substantially across the state. I mean, I can think of other cities, the city of Franklin and in Dover and in Claremont. I don't know firsthand Berlin, but I've got to assume in Berlin with some of the old mill similar properties and stuff that we have. So that's what it does. But the key is public benefit within a narrow scope. We had the public hearing tonight. No one spoke on this particular one. Somebody to speak on the other one. But the council needs to deliberate and identify, first of all, if there is a public benefit, and then identify what it is, and then discuss about with the scope of the project, what type of tax relief you would be looking to offer up. I'm happy to answer any questions on that.
What is your recommendation?
I think first, before I would get into what I would recommend, I think the council should deliberate as to, is there a public benefit or not? And then if you determine there's a benefit, then I'm happy to talk about some timeframes for this particular project.
Go right ahead, Councilor. Oh, I'm sorry.
Just, again, I think part of the situation here is trying to make that project come to life. And I think that it's a project that, part of making a downtown successful is to have people who are close enough by to take advantage of the stores and the different things. And it's a good complement to the business development that's down there. I think, you only have to look across the street to, a deal that was put together with the old police station that sat vacant for more than a decade and now is, on the tax rolls producing, a building that has, good value. And I think in this instance, the project proposed here of 8 plus 4 units, adding 12 units to the downtown area in a walkable spot makes a lot of sense for the city, and I think it's a good project, and it's the right application of it. I'm glad to see that people are finally discovering 79E on the books of the city of Laconia.
Also, they have their own parking, so it's not like they're going to be using parking someplace else, because the parking is part of that whole redevelopment.
I think that's an excellent point. We keep the 87 spots that we wanted. Yeah, absolutely. Go right ahead, Counselor Cheney.
Well, towards Scott's question, I think we've listed, you and I have listed a number of the advantages of this to the city. I think getting it back on the tax rolls, adding affordable housing in the downtown are certainly goals the city ought to be pursuing. And I think this meets the requirements of 79E in terms of those benefits to the city.
So these are market rate apartments. Is that correct?
Correct. There is no subsidy, local, state, or federal involved with these.
Okay. All right.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
If I understand this right, when I look at the proposal I see here, before the development starting, the school assessment is roughly $614,000.
It is. So we went in and updated it, knowing that, updated the assessment on 50 Church Street, knowing that now we owned it and we were looking to put it back into the tax rolls. So our assessing department went through and looked at it. And I'm not to say that we didn't give it a high priority in past years, but where it wasn't on the tax rolls, it was the diocese owned, it wasn't taxable. We didn't spend a lot of time going through a large building and trying to determine, did it increase by 5%? Did it stay flat? Because at the end of the day, it was non-taxable. So the assessing department did go through and look at the building in its current state and brought it in conditions with roof challenges and window challenges, and actually reduced the assessment from what we had in the books that probably was, 10 years old, if not more, down to the level of $614,000. So that is a firm number that is in place as of the start of the assessing year beginning April 1. So that would be reflective once we close on the property, and the tax bill that would be put out in November for payment due in December, prorated by whatever date, because we've got a partial year going on here. So the value of 614,000 would be as the building stands today. Moving forward, and again, everything ties to that April 1st start to the tax year, or March 31st ending the tax year. We know that within this proposal, the developer is tearing down the 1950 whatever gymnasium portion of the building and leaving just the 1924 original school building and then adding on. So it could line up where demolition of the gym occurs somewhere between now and March 31st. When we hit that deadline line in the sand, the gymnasium isn't there. So that might mean that the assessment that first year might not be 614 because a portion of the building is no longer there. It might drop by whatever that value is for that year. And then once the addition comes on, again, we all go to that April 1st date, it would kick into it. So yes, on the books right now it's 614. It could drop a little bit depending on the timing of the demo and if no new construction had started when that March 31st date hits.
Okay, but to get just clarity, okay, the amount that the developer will be paying taxes on that 614.
Yes.
That's not what 79E does. 79E allows him to construct and do redevelopment over a period of time and not have an increase in taxes over that period of time until he's completely all done.
Correct. So if a year from now he was still building, but there was the 4-unit addition was on but not completed, so he wasn't earning any income from renting those units, but we added $300,000 in value. I'm just making up a number there. And now we say, great, even though you're not, don't have any tenants yet because you're not complete, we've just increased your value from 600,000 to 900,000 and increased your tax bill by 50%. So 79E would allow you to give a little bit of a longer period where we hold it at a $600,000 level,
Okay.
allow the project to complete, allow it to have tenants move in so that the property is starting to earn a return, and then raise the taxes on it at that point to the market value.
Okay.
Let's
Thank
not
you.
forget right now it's 0.
Right. No, I agree with that, Bruce. I mean, just wanted to get clarity to make sure everybody understood. and there was
That's
any
the intent. You're able to make your investment, get it occupied before we hand you a larger tax bill.
question. No, I think it's good.
It's a great incentive to come in and take one of
Yes,
these
very
buildings
good.
like this. It's going to take a little time to get it up and occupied and fully functioning. So you want to lead on the motion?
Sure. Make a motion if it's acceptable, a move to provide the developer of 50 Church Street the following tax relief under RSA 79E based on the public benefit identified during city council deliberations. The relief is to consist of an assessed valuation of the property at 650 Church Street to not be greater than 614,200 through March 31, 2023. After that point, the property will be assessed at fair market value in accordance with the terms of the purchase and sales agreement with K&M Holdings dated April 23rd, 2021. Granting this application will provide benefit to the public in accordance to RSA 79E:7, 1, 3, and 4, Roman numerals, which include enhancing the economic vitality of a downtown, promoting development of municipal centers, and increasing residential housing in urban centers.
Second.
Seconded by Counselor Susie. Is there any further discussion on the motion on the table right now? Seeing none, all those in favor of this motion, please indicate by raising your hand. That's 5 votes in the affirmative, and that motion passes. Moving along to item number 22D. This is a review and discussion of an application of a tax relief under, again, 79E. It's popular tonight for the property at 781 Union Avenue. Scott, if you could just give us an overview of this as well, if you don't mind.
Yes, just trying to pull up an email here. Yes, so again, same 79E, 781 Union Ave is the property we refer to as Lakeport Opera House. You heard Mr. DeCola speak tonight, and he's accurate that he came in and talked about putting an application in for that property. My initial conversation with him is that this is typically prospective and it's meant to incentivize development, and that project, had certificates of occupancy at least on 2 floors. He said yes, but it's not complete. And I said, but again, I think the intent was to get your approvals in place, get the conditions, the expectations, talk about what the public benefit is in order to receive tax relief in advance of this. I further let him know that it wasn't my decision ultimately to accept or reject this, and that was my opinion, and I would be offering that as staff opinion to the city council, but that if he would like me on behalf of his client to bring this forward and move this so that he could get a formal decision, that I'd be happy to do that. And he asked for that, and part of the reason that somebody wants a formal decision from the legislative body would be that if there was a reason to decline, they have an appeal process that's available to them. So he gave some good background, but that's just a little bit more detail on it there. So again, my concerns on this is the project is 2/3 complete, the ground floor and the middle floor are done. Therefore, the assessed value is already captured, and under a different provision of RSA 79E, I'm going to refer to :13, Roman 1, small letter B, reads, tax relief granted under this chapter shall be calculated on the value in excess of the original assessed value, which is then defined as the value of the qualifying structure. So the difference being here is the applicant is requesting tax relief on a project that I'll just simplify by saying is 2/3 complete. So that value is already there, even though some of that value occurred pre-March 31st, end of the assessing year, because the retail was open and had the certificate of occupancy. The theater, when we were assessed, the theater portion on the second floor, when we went to capture that date and time of March 31st, was partially complete. So we've gathered that value. Where the application came in July, after the certificate of occupancy was now already issued for the theater, even though we didn't go out and do that full assessment in July or June when the certificate of occupancy was issued, because again, we got to remember that March 31st date is what really matters in the assessing world under state law. We would go out and look at that and say, it's full value. Those 2 floors are fully built out. We're going to say the value. So to request tax relief, there's no relief to be granted because we are already starting at your highest base. You are complete with those 2 floors of the project. That was a secondary reason of why this didn't really work under the language of 79E. additional component under that same chapter of 79E says the tax reliefs granted under this chapter shall only supply to substantial rehabilitation, which it does, that commences after the governing body approves the application and the owner grants to the municipality the covenant. So what that means is you've got to approve the application before we can grant tax relief. The project's already done,
There was
and
no sorry to interrupt, there was no covenant.
and there's
prior
no,
to the
there's no
project.
covenant. So the one that we just did for 50 Church Street, the former Holy Trinity School, there'll be a covenant there in place when we sign the closing documents tied into what you approved tonight for the tax relief. On the applicant for 781 Union, it talks about the substantial rehabilitation that commences after the governing body approves the application. That's clearly not the case here. So as much as I think we all love the project, and you can speak to that, and it may have warranted a full-blown yes from the council, that is staff recommendation to you, is that under the statute, you do not have the authority to grant approval to tax relief on this application, unfortunately. If it had been submitted a year ago, a whole different story.
I think that's what's, thank you, Scott. I think what's that's frustrating to know that it was a timing issue and we didn't have the condition preceding to act on it. And I think what's troubling about it, not troubling, I mean, it's straightforward, but we've got great development going in Lakeport. We want to encourage continued development. We've got someone who's willing to not just talk about enhancing the area, but actually stepping up and doing something. But I tend to agree with your interpretation. I do agree with your interpretation of where we're at right now on this as you read the statute.
One more step, okay, besides Scott's interpretation, and I'm not sure if this is right or not, but you brought this to our legal counsel also, and he agrees with that?
Yes, legal counsel looked at it, and not only that, the application is prospective and meant to, incentivize someone, really focused on that last portion that I read to you as being the council does not have the authority under state law to grant this because all of the rehabilitation occurred before you approved the application, and that's pretty clear, and we had no covenant in place. So as like I say, like I've heard you say, as much as you'd love to, you can't under state law. You don't have that authority.
And he still can apply for the third portion of the project. Is that correct?
He could apply to do the third floor. We would have to walk over and see what condition and apply a value. I don't know if it's roughed in or it's just one giant empty space. I don't know that. So we would have to go apply a value to that. And an application would have to come in and you would have to declare whatever he's proposing for that space to be a public benefit. And again, I've kind of run through what the criteria is. Other projects the same developer is planning on doing in Lakeport that he has not started any more than some earthwork and some pilings at this point would absolutely be pre-construction, and now would be the time to get those applications in. Again, still subject to a public hearing and you're deliberating and stating what the public benefit is, but now is the time.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, Councilor Susie, you have one more
I
question?
just wanted to, Scott brought up the point. I was going to say that when I spoke to them earlier today, again, reiterated what you said. Now is the time to bring the other applications in. There's just a hole in the ground, or there's a plan to do some other things. Bring them now, not later. Okay, thank you.
So where's that leave us?
So I think that where it leaves us is, as much as we would like to be retrospective, we're not legally allowed to under the statute, based on our manager's reading of it, based on a municipal attorney that represents the city who's experienced in the law with respect to this. I think by taking, as the city manager outlined, if for some reason there's a different interpretation that the courts can make by making a decision to deny it, would give him the opportunity to test that part of the law. So,
would you like to make a motion which
Yeah.
would give him the opportunity to do that, or?
yes, I would like
we
to make
just-
a motion.
Do we even have to Well, never mind.
Yes.
I'd move to deny the application for tax relief filed by Pagus Union 2 LLC under the provisions of RSA 79E for its property at 781 Union Avenue. The improvements to that property had already been completed prior to the filing of the application or giving of the covenant required by statute. Therefore, in accordance with RSA 79E:13, there's no statutory relief that can be granted by the city for these improvements.
Second by Counselor Cheney. Is there any further discussion on the motion Counselor Littman brought forward? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion indicate by raising your hand. That's 5 votes in the affirmative. That motion passes.
And again, I think we really are appreciative of what's being done in the city by this developer and only wish that he had come in earlier
Definitely.
and hope he comes in earlier on the next one.
Yep.
Mr. Mayor, I know there's still one item here,
There is.
and it's probably gonna take a lot longer than.
Would you like a moment?
No, I think we need to.
No.
Oh, we need to
Make
hit
a motion
9:55.
Continue, we need.
I'd like to continue it
Continue to another date or continue tonight?
to another date.
I think that makes sense.
It does make sense because we don't want
Yeah.
Counselor Hamlin to miss out on this discussion.
Right.
You know, he's gone so far as Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, I think, just to get away from this meeting tonight. So.
But he did send me a text saying, I heard that. So I
All
gotta
right.
be more careful.
So I guess the appropriate motion right now would be to table this. We'll table this and we'll put it on the
2
next for 2 weeks. Yes.
Or I'm sorry, we have 3 weeks between the next
Till the
meeting.
next meeting.
Till next
Three
meeting.
weeks.
Up to
Thank
the
you.
next meeting. Okay, terrific. We'll
2 days
do that.
before I leave
I'd
on
like
my
to
next
adjourn the.
Need a motion and a second to table.
Make a
Oh,
motion to
there'll be
table.
no debate. So made by Counselor Cheney, seconded by Counselor Susie. All those in favor? 5 votes in the affirmative. That motion passes, and I will adjourn the city council meeting of August 23rd.